stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, our next order of business is public comments. Vic?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was up here a couple of weeks ago and made a comment about the sewer rehabilitation project down on Powder Mill Road. And I have a large flower holiday coming up called Valentine's Day. And I was hoping that somehow or other that somebody in town government somewhere would lessen the impact. Now, I had to go to Concord today, and on the way back, down at, right just over the town line of ways there on the Powder Mill Road that goes up to the Mews, there was an officer sitting in a truck and a sign that says, "Road open to the Elks." I have a barrier just about on the property line between myself and the Middlesex Savings Bank. And I had several people that came in, and if the officer on duty hadn't informed them that they could come to the flower shop, they would not have come. And I don't know why, and as I say, I don't know what the logistics are, but when you upset people's everyday routine, you're fooling around with a lot of stuff. But anyway, I can't understand why they're saying that you can go to the Elks, but yet they have a barrier between my place and the Middlesex Savings Bank. So that's one thing I would hope that somewhere along the way, town government would kind of take care of some of us fellas that work 6-7 days a week in private businesses to survive. And you know, when you lose a pretty good hunk of business on any particular time, there is no way that you're going to make it up. That I wanted to get out of the way first, okay?
Okay.
The other thing, I have a couple of things here. 2 weeks ago, I was here at a Selectmen's meeting, and there were a couple of gentlemen that made a very good presentation for Maynard Youth Soccer. And I sat there and looked at a graph on that television set, and my understanding was that the Don Lent Field is part of school property. And I don't know exactly how we're funding Parks and Recreation, but that field has been neglected for more years than you would ever realize. I don't know how they ever played any baseball up there. But anyway, I was very surprised to see that the school department graciously offered to set aside $30,000 for a project that you have volunteers working their fanny off to put the thing into shape on a $500,000 project. Now, I don't know what kind of a budget the school department has to take care of these fields, but it seems rather odd that citizens that work very hard have to raise the money to take care of the school department's property. I presume we still have a facilities manager, and I'm wondering if the facilities manager checks these things. Like, for instance, at the new high school, around the athletic field, you have a whole series of newly planted trees that are literally dying because they need a lot of attention. Then you have the driveway over at the Fowler School that needs some attention. And behind the building, there are boiler pots that I'll bet, and my memory is not that good, they've been sitting out there for about 5 years. Originally, they were covered, but they haven't been covered for quite a period of time. And the thing of it was that they figured they were going to sell those pots to somebody else. But those pots are so obsolete, about the only thing they're good for is scrap. And if anything, they should be taken care of that way just to eliminate the unsightly look. let's see here. And the other question I'd like to ask is, my understanding was that the school, the Fowler School, was air-conditioned. And if you go around to the administrative wing of the school, there are more window air conditioners sticking out of there than you can imagine. And my understanding it was that, yes, the building committee ran short of money, but all the ductwork has been there. All they had to do was get some equipment and hook it up to the ductwork. Let's see. And also, we're spending a considerable amount of money renovating the Memorial Park in memory of our veterans and so forth. And I reported this once before. There is a utility pole on Summer Street that has a transformer on it that is leaning pretty badly. And my guess is, and I'm not an expert at this stuff, that the only thing that's holding that pole up are the wires that are attached to it from the other two poles on either side. I understand at one time somebody approached the utility company to do something about it, but utility company are a world all of their own. They don't seem to give a darn, because if you look now, my deal for a lot of time was double poles. Well, they did a little bit of it to kind of placate the gang. Now there are more and more appearing all the time, and they have a little deal they call chunking, which means that they attach a pole to the existing pole, okay, and they cut off the one that they want to get rid of, but they never seem to move it. And if you check your electric utility bill, you'll find, if you inquire, there is a charge there that is supposed to help them remove double poles. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate
Thank you.
your listening.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Am I understood?
You see my name on there?
I apologize.
We're gonna put a plaque on it for next week.
So, I apologize.
Okay, anyone else have any public comments this evening?
Hi there.
Hi.
Dave Krieger, 22 Brown Street. First off, welcome. You're still relatively new to the town. We haven't met yet, but welcome as our new town administrator. This week, there's been a lot of chatter online, even in the media, about Green Meadow. Clearly, over the last few months, we've had, as parents, a lot of chatter about mold. A lot of these issues have been either rectified or addressed. This past week is more about asbestos. It's also not the first time it's been addressed. It's not on the agenda for today. So outside of the question why it's not on the agenda for today, I'd like to understand how the Board of Selectmen is actually working with the school committee and town administration, school administration, to get a clear plan of action, accountability, and specifically a clear plan on the fast forward. Not as much on the looking back, what should have done to happen differently, etc., more on the go forward. I have a 5-year-old kindergartner. For the last 3 days, he's been watching movies in the cafeteria. What does that mean? No access to the academic curriculum. He also has special needs. He's not getting those serviced. Preschoolers are not being sent to school. And I don't know about you, but I have no confidence that next week it's going to be different, because next week these issues are not resolved. So kids are being moved from one location to another, and I understand that there's always a lot more nuances. But I think when there's not a lot of clarity around why steps are being taken, sometimes those things cannot be explained in the moment, but stories take a hold of their own, right? So if you go on social media, you see a lot of parents talking, right? And an idea becomes a concern becomes somebody else's reality, and it spurs out of control. But what we all as parents want is we want to make sure that we are upholding what we're saying, what Maine it stands for. I just printed off one page. The first page, actually, because my printer didn't work that well, but the very first page But everybody should really be familiar with this signal, this sign, right? Safe, healthy. I think a lot of parents right now are not too comfortable sending their kids to Green Meadow because they're not sure they're safe and healthy. They're sitting in a cafeteria, and further down the hall, some remediation work is supposed to start on asbestos that everybody knows asbestos, when it's airborne, certainly not as healthy for you. So I guess the question that I have for the Board of Selectmen is, what is the interaction model that you have with the school committee, and particularly with school administration, to properly address this, not just in the immediate term, but the long term, because our school administrators are not building maintenance people. They are supposed to focus on educating our kids. Right now, they don't have the resources, they don't have the locations to actually safely put our kids, our preschoolers, and our kindergartners, and educate them. So that's my question. My assumption is not it's going to get a lot of airtime on this agenda, but it is a question that I'm hoping we can get answered tonight. Thank you.
Okay, it's not on the agenda because the agenda was posted prior to this whole thing kind of blowing up, which I think was Thursday night into Friday.
Yep.
So our agenda was posted Thursday. So once it's posted, we typically don't change it. I'm pretty sure that, at least I know myself, Justine and David have been in touch with the school committee members to get an update, and throughout the process of the mold and the other issues, the airborne issues that throughout the last several months or year, we've been getting an update through Aaron McCloskey's office and the facilities director, Tim, right? So, we've kind of been getting an update as to what's been happening. The asbestos piece is brand new, so we haven't been fully updated on that yet, because I don't know that everybody has all the answers to update us with. I know that some of us intend to go to the school committee meeting Thursday as well, but we've reached out to the school committee and offered whatever support they think they're going to need when the time comes that they need it. And they've kind of told us that they think they have it under control at this point, but at some point we'll talk about what we can do to help going forward. But other than that, those things are they fall under the purview of the school committee and the school administration. The town of Maynard has a facilities director and a DPW director, and Aaron does much more than just serve as a DPW director in Maynard, if you know anything about what goes on in town with the facilities and the buildings and the roads. And Aaron and the facilities director have been in constant contact with the schools, walking through the halls, doing all the legwork to support the schools from this side of the building. So that's what we've done so far, and we're kind of in a position where we're like a lot of parents, we don't know everything, but we've been, as informed as we can be to this point, and we'll continue to be informed, and when the time comes that we have to reach out to help or ask to help, we will do that. I don't know if that answers your question, but, and if anybody else wants to comment on it, you feel free, but I think that's where we are as a board. And we've been getting, updates throughout the day as different things come available from the school committee to Greg. Greg's been forwarding them immediately to the five of us.
I think what's been hard with some of it is just that it feels at this moment is a very fluid thing that might take a couple days to get answers to. And as a parent, especially a parent of a young one who's in that school, I can, not me, but for you, I can understand that that's frustrating, and the uncertainty is very unnerving, especially for little kids. But I am confident that the school committee is working very closely with Aaron and trying to come up with a plan. But I'm also confident they're not going to say what their plan is until it's something that can concretely be explained. So that's why I think we're all kind of waiting for Thursday night, because I think we're giving them a couple days to get the right answers so they can really be informed and give the parents the answers they're looking for on Thursday. So that's my personal opinion.
That it? Okay. Anyone else have any public comments this evening? Okay. Thank you. Minutes, we have some minutes to accept, and the minutes that we need to accept are from our meeting on January 29th. And I make a motion that we move to accept and approve the meeting minutes of January 29th as shown. Have a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments or questions about the minutes of the 29th meeting? Okay. All right, all those in favor? Thank you. Correspondences. We have correspondence items A through E. And I'm going to make a motion that we move to accept and approve the 5 correspondence items A through E as presented. Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay. Any conversation about the 5 correspondence items?
The March for Meals thing.
Yeah,
I have never done it, but I think I was here last year when you guys said that you've done it.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, it's not March for Meals because it's in March, but it's really a
Right.
Meals for Wheels thing, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Yeah.
yeah, I already signed up.
Have
But
you
yeah,
really?
yeah.
Excellent, all right.
Nope, it's, yeah, we've
Yeah.
done it.
I will get working on that. Very cool.
Does anybody have any questions about the other 4 items?
Actually, do you know, someone actually asked me this, the View. Do you know if it's pet friendly?
Yeah, it's funny, because we asked them that question that day,
Did we ask that? I
Yeah.
forget.
Well, what's the question?
whether it's pet friendly.
Pet friendly.
Oh,
I wasn't sure who to,
We didn't-
who
we
to
didn't
ask
get
on
an
that. Is
answer.
it La Cat, is it, I guess,
I could find out.
yeah. I've had a couple people ask me.
Okay. Anything else? All those in favor of those? Thank you. Okay, the consent agenda is 1 item, which is, make a motion we move to accept and approve the 1 consent item as presented. Mr. Parker's annual maple sugaring allowance.
Excellent. Second?
Second, thank you.
Gotta love maple sugar.
Um,
Maple syrup.
so, any other questions about that one?
No. Isn't he afraid of getting hit with golf balls while he's doing that?
No, he's done before we go back out and play. I think he'll be done.
Oh, he does it before
He's
the,
usually, he starts now, and I think he's done in March,
oh,
mid-March, with the tapping. Nope, no one out there playing now. All those in favor? He's not in the way anyways. He's off to the, he's right by the, road.
oh, he's right on the
When you go
road.
in, he's right there on the left.
You can see the tubes
Yeah, I
going
just.
from the
I
trees, yeah.
Yeah.
Just reminded me.
All right, discussion with the school committee regarding the state budget letter.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
So far, I've been answering a lot of questions for you guys, but
Sure meeting.
don't worry. So, we all have seen the letter, and I didn't know if you guys had anything to add to the letter, but
The background information is this is a movement that is being organized by the Massachusetts Teachers Association. So the 2 professional unions that fall under that umbrella in our town, our Teachers Association and our paraprofessionals.
Justin, I'm sorry, could you introduce yourselves?
Oh, sorry. Justin Hem, School Committee Chair.
And Dawn Capello, School Committee.
Sorry about that. So our 2 professional associations in town attended our meeting several weeks ago and asked for school committee support on this initiative. We are all intimately familiar with Chapter 70 funding because of the budget process. But what most members of the community and some elected officials are not aware is that the formula that is used to calculate the Chapter 70 funding hasn't been updated drastically in more than 25 years. In adjusted dollars, we are spending less on education than we did in 2001. And with education becoming increasingly staff-heavy and increasingly technology-heavy, and all of the initiatives that come down from the Commonwealth and the federal government, what we're being asked to do in the schools is far outpacing the level of support that we're receiving from the Commonwealth. So several years ago, there was a nonpartisan commission that looked at the foundation budget. They wrote an extremely comprehensive report that was chock full of recommendations. If you haven't read the report, you can find it online with an easy Google search. It's the Foundation Budget Review Commission Summary Report. And basically what they're calling for is fixing the funding formulas. Targeting the fact that the rate of reimbursement for special education costs is drastically lower than promised by the Commonwealth. Spending on English language learners, spending on healthcare costs and associated costs. The cities and towns are being increasingly asked to do more and more and more with less and less and less aid from the Commonwealth. So this initiative that is being organized by the Massachusetts Teachers Association, which our unions have signed on in support of, and which our school committee has signed on in support of also, is really to encourage our legislature and Governor Baker to take a hard look at spending. There's some encouraging trends that are going on right now. Governor Baker has increased funding on a year-over-year basis in his recommended budget pretty substantially, but it still doesn't come anywhere close to what that commission report recommends. In raw numbers, in 2015, 2016, when the commission was studying the process, the commission estimates that the 325 different school districts and collaborative districts in the Commonwealth are being underfunded by about $1 billion a year for pre-K through 12. So fixing the formula, a lot of the money will go to the neediest towns. The formula is incredibly complex. There's some really great educational literature online about it, but it's predominantly a measure of a town's ability to support to the level of what an education should cost. It's the per pupil spending that we spend a lot of time talking about. So the poorest cities and towns is calculated on the real estate value and a rolling percentage of the income of the citizens of that town. And again, the model's broken. Our politicians have acknowledged it, our educational leaders have acknowledged it, but there's been a hesitancy to fix it. So that's what we're hoping to encourage our school leaders to do. That's what we're encouraging our elected officials to do. And just to let you know, we have had our 2 elected representatives come and visit our recent school committee meetings. We were lucky to have Jamie Eldridge come out about a month and a half ago, sat through a budget presentation, and we were able to show him in real dollars what fixing the foundation budget would mean for a town like Maynard. And several weeks ago, we were also lucky enough to have Kate Hogan come out and join us for an evening, and we gave her exactly the same presentation. The Senate actually passed a resolution last year to fully fund the foundation budget, the recommendations of the foundation budget review, but the accompanying legislation in the House actually got hung up. So we really spent a lot of time talking to Kate and really encouraging her to work with her colleagues in the House to try to push this forward, because it would mean very real dollars. And I'd like to have Dawn just sort of talk about what our finance director has estimated would be the real dollar impact for Maynard if we could get these recommendations fully funded.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a moving target, but I think you all know Michelle Resendez, the school business manager, and she estimates that Maynard would receive an additional $1.2 million, which sounds like a big helpful number, and it is, and of course it would be if it goes all the way through in the different versions. But what you'll see on Saturday when we sit down for the budget presentations, Maynard is currently underfunded for special ed $2.9 million and for healthcare, $2.8 million, and I may have those backwards, but you get my point, 2.8 and 2.9 million. So it's still really a drop in the bucket, but every bit helps, and I think we always, sometimes during budget season, wonder why we put so much on Maynard residents and why we're always coming to the town, it seems, for a shortfall. And it's, I think Justin's point that more and more it's being pushed on the local municipalities. So we've signed on to these resolutions the past couple of years. This is the latest version. It's a solid version. We still are waiting to hear back from Senator Eldridge's office to understand that it's the right thing for Maynard, because we're not Brockton and Worcester and some of the more urban communities, but just the early back of the napkin trying to kind of go through everything says we would get an additional 1.2 million. And I don't know how they do that, right? Do they do a 5-year phase in? It certainly wouldn't likely be all at once, So we're supportive, and we're just trying to sort of manage upwards, all of us, just to tell our representatives what's important to us as a community. So we signed on to the resolution. It was a very easy decision for us because we live and breathe this. So Greg had asked us to come in case you all had any questions, if we had any answers, but it's fairly straightforward.
Excellent.
Thank you. And at Budget Subcommittee meeting that we had not that long ago, this conversation
came up. And it's been, as you all both know, it's been a point of conversation now for several years relative to the proper funding mechanism or the proper funding scheme. My concern has been that the $1.2 million that you mentioned, how real that is. I certainly favor changing the formula so that whoever is entitled to it gets the funding sources that they are. But my fear is, you alluded to it, Don, that that the majority of the funding that comes through will go to districts other than Maynard, even though Maynard is sort of the prototype because we're so small and we need more assistance than we can provide to ourselves. So that's my comment, is I'm concerned. I certainly support the endeavor to adjust the formula. I'm just worried about how it affects us. And I think there are other aspects, and it was interesting, this thing that we get, this beacon that comes out to all municipal, employees and elected officials. Right Today has a comment on it in the front page article of the governor files FY20 budget education plan. And when you read through it, it had some interesting points. And it's not just the formula that you're talking about that is sick. There are
That's
other
true.
aspects
Charter
of
reimbursements is another
education.
one.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm just going to read a couple of lines here that I think make an example of it. It says most cities, this is written by a guy named John Robertson, I don't know him, so, Anyway, most cities and towns and regional school districts, however, would still receive an increase in fiscal 2020 of just the minimum aid of $20 per student next year under the governor's current proposed plan, which is known as House 1. It goes on to say, because it is so difficult for one formula to adequately address the distinctions among 406 operating districts, the MMA, members from across Massachusetts, unanimously adopted at last month's annual meeting a resolution calling for at least $100 per student in minimum new aid, as well as completely overhauling the charter school finance system and fully funding other key accounts, including special education and school transportation. A critical gap in the administration's plan is the lack of a real solution to the deeply flawed charter school finance system. Fixing the charter school funding mess is essential to any Chapter 70 reform plan. The MMA's immediate analysis is that charter school reimbursements would continue to fall far short. This would continue to divert Chapter 70 funds away from municipally operated school districts and place greater strain on the districts that serve 96% of public school children. Department of Elementary and Secondary Education have said the House 1 appropriation would result in a 70% reimbursement amount for high-cost out-of-district placements, rather than the statutory 75%, which indicates a shortfall of approximately $18 million. This is a vital account that every city, town, and school district relies on to fund state-mandated services, and the MMA will again be asking lawmakers to ensure full funding in fiscal 2020. And then it says the final result, whatever it may be, will need to be more comprehensive, integrated with charter school finance reform, coupled with full funding of all other education programs implemented over a shorter time period and supported by adequate minimum aid to avoid leaving any district behind.
Right.
So that's, it's more complex than just what's in this.
Oh,
Sure is.
And I
absolutely.
think so it's an entire issue that needs to be looked at and addressed. And I also want to make sure that whatever happens, that Maynard isn't sort of forgotten because we're a small little community that doesn't have a loud voice.
Sure. It's funny that you actually touch on the charter school reimbursements, because when you dive into some of the information online, one of the recommended House bills that is being co-sponsored by the Mass Teachers Association in conjunction with a number of delegates across the state is looking specifically at the charter school reimbursement. Because you're absolutely right. The Foundation Budget Review Commission doesn't necessarily touch on that. And it's maybe 60 or 70% of the problem. And yeah, absolutely the charter school reimbursement is part of that. And one of the reasons why I was so interested in the Fund Our Future campaign is because they've already crafted legislation to target that particular shortfall, among other things. So it's encouraging. Not only are they recommending the recommendations of the committee's report, but they're also looking at the nuances that you were just so thoughtfully sharing with the group.
Yeah, the details are key. So, when we talk about it with Jamie and with Kate and with whoever will listen, among school committee colleagues across the state, we really do hone in on what we really need is special ed funding. What we really need is charter reimbursements. Like when you get into the governor's budget, which I don't spend too much time on because it's just the first version, our charter reimbursements are going down, and that seems preposterous. So
It's really just shifting funds from one line item to another, unfortunately.
So we're definitely on the same page, David, so I appreciate you bringing that up. We look at it more, this is one of those ones where you do want to be a little bit in the weeds, because you can't just say, sign this legislation and all will be well. So so I appreciate you bringing that up, and it's almost like we're sharing a mind on that one.
Yeah.
It's the devil's in the details, for sure.
House One, he's trying to implement some of the recommendations over a 7-year phase-in period, and a lot of the pushback that has immediately come out in response to House One is that 7 years is far too long, and by the time that that's fully implemented, they'll have to fix the problem yet again.
Behind again.
Right, so.
Let alone the fact that a child who starts in first grade when the program starts is now in junior high school or high school by the time that the program has been
And
funded.
what do they miss out on as a result of that?
Right.
Yep.
So we looked at the resolution as supporting the big picture idea of addressing the shortfalls in school funding. So that part for us was easy. The hard part is what we've been doing, is the advocacy on the, sort of the weeds that you spoke about. So that's sort of where we landed on that. So
Yeah, and I don't want to suck up a lot of your time, but as part of the resolution we signed on with, there are community-based meetings that are occurring under the Fund Our Future umbrella. My home district where I teach in Lexington hosted one last night with their elected officials as a way of educating the community members about the need for fixing the funding of our public schools and ways to get involved in advocacy and awareness. And one of the things that we are having a conversation about at our school committee level is running a similar event at some point in the not so distant future, so that we can educate the members of the community about the need, and hopefully motivate some people to advocate and try to do the best things possible for our students, our staff, and the town of Maynard. So
One last comment I want to make is that I don't want my comments or my criticism or whatever to come across as being that I am anti-charter school, because that's not the case.
Oh,
I'm
no, it's
actually
just funding.
pro-charter and also pro-vocational.
Yeah.
And so, there's just a realm of different types of education that all children, in my view, need to be exposed to and have the
Yeah.
opportunity to go to, but not necessarily at the expense of the public school system.
absolutely,
it
charters.
just comes down to the funding formulas. So if we get $5,000 per student at Maynard to educate a student, yet if they have a different path, which I agree with you, I think different paths are great. There's different types of students nowadays. But we end up paying $14,000 to $18,000. It's just, the math should really be across the board the same, in my personal opinion. It's just.
Yeah, that's one of the things we talked to Kate and Jamie about, is just leveling the playing field. Charters and vocationals fill a niche. Every student has the right to the education that they need, and they deserve that. I want the rules to be the same. That's all I really want.
Okay.
I have no questions.
I believe we already voted to support this, right?
No, we did
No,
not.
we haven't done
Because
it
we
yet,
didn't
no.
We voted to wait?
We did.
Yeah, because we didn't know what it meant.
We
It was part of the correspondence.
part of the
last week. It was
correspondence,
not-
You accepted it.
Yeah, we
accepted
accepted
it through
that, but, yeah.
correspondence.
You've not endorsed.
Yeah, and I think that's the purpose of them being here, I think.
But it's not an action item in here.
It's not. It's up to you, Mr. Chairman. You can voice your own individual opinions of it, as you've already been doing, or we could draft a correspondence similar to what, the school committee did, so you can,
I think we,
however you want. But you're right, it is not an action. There's no motion right now on the
right,
table.
but I think by accepting it last week in the agenda, it was correspondence or consent. I think that was our approval.
You
We
accepted
just-
it.
All that does is say we received the
Right.
document.
You have not given your
Not
endorsement.
given opinion
Okay.
relative
So,
to
all
the
right, so
issue.
we can. See.
We can put it on the action item for the following, in 2 weeks, if you'd like, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that's fine, we'll just get the language right, so it's
Okay.
done right.
And if you would like one of us to be present in case any additional questions or
Yeah,
comments
that-
pop up, just
Yeah, I
reach
think-
out and one of us will be here.
I think if we have questions, we'll email them.
Sounds good?
We don't have to come here.
We don't need you here.
Well, no, at least the document speaks for itself, you know, it just is what it is. So, all right,
Sounds good.
good, I think.
Well,
I
thanks
think
for the
we
time.
understand.
Thank you,
Really,
guys.
We'll see
really
you on Thursday.
appreciate you considering it.
Thanks for coming, we'll see you Thursday.
Thursday night,
Yeah.
Fowler Auditorium.
Yes, Fowler Auditorium, not the library. We
Okay.
went to the big
Yes.
space,
Oh, okay.
and we're making sure that the acoustics and the
With all
sound
the
are going to be
noise.
good.
What's that?
Gonna follow the noise.
Yeah, exactly, that's true. All right, thanks.
Do you
guys.
know if that's going to be televised live?
There's no live feed out of
There's
Fowler.
none,
Yeah.
none?
No, we only have a live feed out of
This
this
here.
building,
Yeah.
and occasionally at the high school.
So you may remember that a few years ago, there was a warrant article at town meeting to upgrade the infrastructure as far as the digital networks are concerned in multiple buildings. That made a wealth of a difference, but there's still some technological obstacles to going live stream from the Fowler building. One of the things that we've been talking to Stephen, who's our technology director, about is possibly moving to the high school in the future, because the high school is more set up for live streaming. But there's a couple of hurdles that we need to get over first. We're actively working on the problem. It's just, we're kind of a victim of the systems there at this point in time.
They are pretty good with getting it up pretty quickly, though.
Yes,
I
they
will
are.
say, I will note that they.
Oh, I'd say,
you know,
I mean,
it's
I
within
feel
a
like it's
few
almost
days,
within
couple days.
24, 36 hours, so I feel the
WVDM turns
same.
around pretty quick, but as much as I would like it to be live, we can't, unfortunately.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Coolidge School discussion. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you. It's good
Buy
to
your own
be.
bodyguard? All right.
Michael, do it.
You,
There you go.
oh,
Perfect.
there you are.
Wonderful.
Are we doing the working group presentation or the analysis first?
The working group presentation.
All right.
Got it.
Thank
And the
you.
analysis is kind of the background information
Okay, so
for
we-
that, so we'll take questions on both.
All right, so we're just gonna look at this one, and the other one's just there
Yes.
for our,
Just look up there,
yeah, I know.
Oh, here we go.
otherwise you spin your head.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Good, you're good. See, technology.
So, hello, I'm Lindy Gear. I'm the chair of the Coolidge School Working Group, and this is Aaron McCloskey. He's the vice chair. And we're really excited to be here today because our team has made a lot of progress. We're further along than you probably realize, and we've been just chomping at the bit to provide you with an update. And we'd like to hear your questions along the way, so you don't need to wait until the end. Just if you have a question, ask it. And Aaron or I will either answer it, or we also have the rest of our team here. Let me flip the slide here. I have Vicki Brown-Stevens in the back row, Donna Dotson, and then Sarah Donnelly. We're really lucky to have them on the team, so thank you all for being here as well. And I may turf a question that I feel they're more the experts on to them. On the slide, in addition to introducing the team, I wanted to let you know that we officially started meeting as a team in October because of all of the upheaval with the town administrator, the assistant town administrator. Now everyone's set, so we're moving full steam ahead, so it's wonderful. We meet twice a month, but the team members do a lot of individual exploration, reaching out, research on their own outside of team meetings as well. So your original purpose that was given to us, and it was originally written by Andrew Scribner McLean, I want to point out two things on that slide. The main things that we've focused on are in the first line of the purpose, and that is to provide additional insight for the future use of the Coolidge School building. For anyone at home who's watching, it's at 12 Bancroft Street if you're new to town, and you would see it as you're driving down Parker Street. It's a very visible focal point for the town. The other part of the purpose that's really important is the last line where it says, if a sale is to be recommended, a scope of the process for an RFP could be a deliverable. And that's where we're going today. That's where we're going to take you. Everything else in between were the parameters that you wanted us to look at. So that seems a pretty simple purpose, right? Well, the thing about Coolidge is, you probably know, it's a really sticky situation. Because as our team reached out to different people in town to find out, well, what do you think the Coolidge School should be used for? We had over 15 different options that people suggested. And I have these pictures up here because those 15 options are often polar opposites. For example, if you look at the bottom right, that's a demolition. It makes me cringe a little bit, even though I love open space. A lot of wonderful buildings in my hometown were demolished. But if we demolish something to create a larger park there, which a lot of people in town would like, we need more green space in Maynard. Think back, when the school was built, there was a lot of green space. We don't have pockets of green space in highly dense neighborhoods anymore. It's only on the outskirts of town. So that's certainly a viable option. But then you go diagonal, and we would lose in the top corner an architectural gem in town, something that a lot of other people would like to historically preserve. So that's what I mean by Coolidge is sticky, because you have these very different viewpoints in town from different cross-sections of the town. Another example would be in the middle. You see a school in another town where an addition was put onto it in an L shape. Looks wonderful, would bring you a lot more revenue, but it doesn't fit in with the character of the neighborhood. And of course, it would then mean we would have no sledding hill, which, as you know, over 250 people signed a petition saying that they wanted to keep that. So that's what I mean by it's sticky. So that's where our team started, and let me tell you where we went from there. So flipping the slide, one important thing that we want you to know is that we agree with the Coolidge Reuse Task Force. They were the task force that preceded us, and they informed a lot of our work in that if money were no object, I think most of us in town would say, let's keep the school in town hands and let's reuse it for some purpose currently or in the future. What most residents don't know is that the school needs over $2.5 million worth of repairs, okay? And if I had a cape or I won the lottery, I would be the first one to try to help out. But I don't think our town finances are there at the moment. So we tended to look at options beyond that. Let me show you what those options were or are. So if you remember, I said we did a cost-benefit analysis on 15 different options. Of those options, we eliminated some that truly didn't seem to make sense with the neighborhood. Like, actually, farm animals and things like that are allowed in that area, and wouldn't that be cool? But it's really not a place where we think a zoo would work well, so we eliminated those kinds of extreme options. Our top option ended up being 1C, which is condominiums within the current school building. So to the naked eye, it would look just as it does today, only a little bit better, because we hope that any developer who buys it would gussy up the back of it, because the back of Coolidge is not looking so great at the moment. The beauty of that, and do you want to chime in a little bit? Because I know this was one of your top options as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, as stated, we took a vote as a group and identified the top options, eliminated a number of them, and most of the options were, most of our top choices are very similar. As you can see, total points, we ranked them, and 1C received the most points. We felt that, it was a neighborhood feel. I myself used to live in that neighborhood right across the street from Coolidge School, and I know looking up and seeing that building vacant is kind of disappointment, and you see there's a number of issues with leaving it vacant. So the option, what we felt was the best, was to reoccupy the building, following the guidelines from the Coolidge School Reuse Committee of maintaining that historical exterior facade while still putting multifamily residence in that. And specifically, it was I think it's affordable family housing was the top choice. The second choice, which was 1A, is very similar. It's just multifamily condominiums sold at market rate. So those two were very similar, but we felt that with the need for affordable housing in the town of Maynard, that kind of bumped it up to a top choice.
And can I add a little bit to the number one? These are all ownership. The condos would be owned by individuals, so we're not talking rentals. And although we call 1C affordable housing, it's really 7 condominiums, 5 of which would be sold at market rate, and then 2 would be sold at an affordable housing rate. The 2 makes them eligible for a grant. I mean, a developer could go down to 1 unit if he or she did not want that grant. It's not that large of a grant. So the numbers might vary a little bit by 1 or 2. And that would bring in, option 1C would bring the town $35K worth of annual revenue. So option 1A that Aaron mentioned is close. It would bring in about $31,000 of annual revenue to the town. The only difference is that 1A has no affordable housing. And so back to you. Yeah.
Can one of you perhaps comment quickly, the total points column, what is that referencing?
Yeah, so each person on our team was asked to pick their top 5 selections out of the 15. There's a statistical analysis you can do, so that's why we did it that way. Out of my top 5 options, for example, I rank ordered them from 1 to 5, with 5 being the choice that I liked the most. Aaron did that, the other team members did that. So the most points you could get were 25 points. Was 25 points. Okay. So you see option 1C almost got a perfect score there from our team.
Can I ask the difference between 1C and 1A? Why could you have up to 7 condos for 1C and only 5 for 1A? Really great question. When it comes to affordable housing, once you have 6 units, you're required to have the next unit be affordable housing. So that's a cutoff where a developer could build 5 slightly bigger condos, but not be beholden to affordable housing. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So the next option, option 3, was affordable family housing built by nonprofit. So an example would be like a Habitat for Humanity. During our investigation process, we brought in a number of folks, different groups, committees, or individual representatives from those groups to discuss different options that would be feasible possibly for this location. And one of them was the Habitat for Humanity folks. We met with them. They explained to us their process and how this could possibly meet a need that they have locally. So we felt that was an appropriate fit for this building possibly.
Yeah, and I want to expand upon that. If you're not familiar with Habitat for Humanity, those are ownership units as well. The person who buys it helps to build his or her own home, so there's a lot of buy-in and pride in ownership, and the community also helps to build it. So there's a sense of community investment as well. So those are the pros of that. The con of that is it does not bring the town as much annual revenue. It would go down to about $18,000. The reason being the houses are smaller homes, smaller units that are assessed at a lower rate. And I guess I back up to the general vision for all 3 of these options. We love the fact that Coolidge could be a multi-generational place for people to live. You could have artists in there. You could have some seniors, although I would say the building is not that accessible for seniors, and adding an elevator in would almost make it cost prohibitive for a developer. They may not break even. Most school reuses are much larger schools. This is about as small as you can go and still get some developers interested. So a lot of different things, but we're really excited at the idea of this could be a model for the rest of the town and sort of be a pilot and energize other parts of town to do similar things.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
With what you just mentioned about the elevator, can they build units and not have an elevator?
Oh, absolutely. Residents would just need to be able to navigate the
Just 'cause it's a rehab?
stairs.
Like, if you built it nowadays, you'd have to have, right? I don't know.
Well, it's not a public
Oh, it's not a-
building. so
It's not a public
it's
building, so you're not
to
required.
to
Yeah.
fulfill
Yeah.
ADA requirements.
Yeah, and it's kind of isolated as well, unless you can walk downtown or navigate some of the hills, it can be difficult to move around. So I'm going to move to the next option, and this is, whoops. This is our final residential option. It happens to be a rental unit, still within the building of Coolidge, but 8 or so rental units within there. Okay, so everything is the same benefits. The sledding hill would stay, the park would stay the same. The exterior of the building would, the roof and the front and at least one side would stay the same, just like the previous task force recommended. This would be rental units, however, and so because rental units are assessed at a slightly lower rate, the revenue for the town would be about $25K. Now, the only reason our team didn't rate that higher, I shouldn't say the only reason, because I'm sure there are others, but a lot of rental units are coming on the market in Maynard. You have The View, you have Powder Mill, you have Main Street, you have Summer Street, and our town already is in line with the national trend of more and more rentals, and so we were sort of veering toward some home ownership to balance the increasing rentals in town. So that was kind of at least my mindset for how I voted there. Our fifth option, which is option 2B, it sort of harkens back to the original purpose of Coolidge, which is have a daycare facility there, or a school, or a Boys and Girls Club type of facility with before and after care. We like that for that emotional reason. At the same time, nonprofits and schools bring 0 tax dollars to the town. Okay, so the town gets 0 financial benefit from that. The other thing, as I looked at RFPs from other towns, in particular Leominster and Fitchburg, they had often sold their historical buildings to nonprofits. Nonprofits are wonderful and they add value to our town. They often also have a shoestring budget. And so fast forward 10 years later, and most of those buildings are decrepit and they're being sold again. And now they're so far deteriorated that no one wants that. And so our team is trying to look at the long term, not just the short term. Ideally, we'd love to have a buyer who has the financial wherewithal to not only buy it and renovate it, but keep it looking great over time. So, and I don't think that's too much to ask. I'm going to have Aaron go over, I mentioned these earlier, but I'm going to have him recap with options 5A and 5C.
Absolutely. So 5A and 5C both received 5 points from the committee as we voted our top choices. So the 5A is town retains Coolidge and renovates it for town use. Again, if money weren't an option, that'd be a great selection. But in its current state, it's really not. There's ceiling damage on the second floor. There's ADA accessibility issues. There's code compliance issues with restrooms. There's other renovations and upgrades that really need to be done before that the town would want to occupy that building or lease out a space for long-term occupancy. So that was a kind of a deterrent, but again, it was all something that would be on maybe our wish list if money weren't an option. So that did receive some points. 5C, town demolishes the building and expand the park. So as was stated earlier, green spaces are limited in town. We're with more and more requests for field rentals, field usage. You can see from the photos if you drive by the park in the wintertime that the number of families that are out enjoying the sledding hill, or in the summertime enjoying the ball field in the park. And we really felt that that's something that was needed in the community. I think one of the I voted as that was my 5th choice personally for received 1 point because I would like to see more green space in town and see that expanded as a park. I see that that's something, a resource that we don't have enough of. And if we weren't able to fill the space and collect some revenue on it, let the townspeople enjoy a bigger open space for the town.
Yeah, I voted for that as well. I think I gave it 1 or 2 points myself. I was originally a big proponent of that until I found out the real cost of demolition, which it is not cheap. It would be about $400,000 to demolish. And that's not just regrading. So just to sum things up, you can see that we went beyond your original parameters. And the reason why is that when we mentioned 15 different options to people, we would always get a lot of pushback, like, I can't believe you're not retaining the school for town use. And I really think people are owed an explanation as to why their favorite uses didn't make our top options. And so by examining all options, even options which might make some people cringe, we felt like we were doing due diligence and able to share more information with the townspeople. So, any questions before I move into the timeline from here? Okay. All right, so here are our recommendations for the next steps and timing. We've talked to various individuals around town to tell us where to head with this, but now we want to start having public meetings so that we can share these top preferences, answer people's questions as to why their favorite ideas did or did not make the final cut. And I'm going to back up a minute and say that any change, but particularly change where people have strong emotions tied to something, if you try to bring about large-scale change all in one chunk, it makes people really nervous because they're not able to grasp everything all at once. So things that if it was an easy change, I might, our team and I might try to just plow on through. We've broken it into smaller, more manageable steps so we can communicate more along the way. And also so that people can wrap their arms around a few chunks. So that's why the communication sessions coming up in February and March, with your go-ahead. We also need to work with the town, Bill Nemser and the planning board, to secure necessary zoning changes. That's mostly going to be their work, but they've been waiting for us to give them these top preferences so that they know how to write the zoning changes.
My recollection is that it's currently zoned as residential, is that correct?
It is. It's zoned general residential, and multifamily housing is allowed by by special permit. However, that's not the kicker for the zoning changes. What it is right now there are certain dimensional lot requirements that go with it. And right now, if we allow someone to put condos within Coolidge, for example, to meet those lot requirements, you would take a huge chunk of the park away.
Yeah, okay.
So that's what the zoning changes will be,
Okay.
like lowering the dimensional requirements, that type of thing.
So would it just be for that lot, so it'd be more like a variance? for the-
Well, how our team wants to do it is to separate off the building and the parking lot next to it, and there's a little space to the north as well, and let a developer have that. But Westford did something amazing in a recent RFP. They drew different lot lines. They had 3 different options that developers could pick from. So that's why we're not coming to you today with a specific boundary line drawn, because our team wants to give the developers 3 different options to choose from, all ones that preserve the sledding hill, the playground, et cetera, but then come back once we see their creative proposals with the final boundary line.
And I believe for the zoning change piece, it would be like an overlay specific to that
Okay.
property, so it wouldn't be a change for that entire residential area.
Yeah, and just because we want to recommend a zoning change to allow different lot sizes for building within the facade of that building, we don't necessarily want to allow future expansions or things like that. So that's why we need to take care to do it right, so to avoid loopholes. So once Bill and the planning board have the zoning changes in place, they can be voted on at May town meeting, but those discussions can be part of the public meetings that we hold with people, so they know why we're asking for these zoning changes. It'll get voted on at town meeting, then we draft and post an RFP. February through June seems kind of long. Let me explain that. We already have an RFP partially written, thanks to Vicky. She started one already, but we need to put the zoning changes into the RFP, so we have to wait until the town meeting, and that gets approved to finalize the RFP. Then we hand it off to Aaron, Greg, town legal counsel to polish it, then we send it off. So we look at the proposals in July, we rate them, decisions are made in August. And Aaron had the brilliant idea of floating an RFP. And I should let you talk about that idea since it's your idea. It's sort of like fishing, you know, you cast your rod out, you know, you cast your line out there and see what bites.
Yeah, so we had, you know, through our discussions, the committee all has their, you know, their individual opinions and preferences for what they would like to have seen. And obviously we brought that down and narrowed it down to those top 5 choices. So what we were kind of recommending is that we do set some basic criteria and open up ideas to the developer, right? Let the developer create what they think might fit in that area based upon the criteria, the broad criteria that we set for them, like maintaining as much of the sliding hill as possible, maintaining the exterior historical facade of the building, minimal impacts to the rest of the neighborhood, things like that, and then create some type of a ranking system so that we can prioritize what we think would be best for the town and the best fit for that space, and go through them. And that way we can then receive those RFPs back, go through them, rate them, provide our recommendations to the board, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, and we loved that idea because the trend we noticed in other towns' RFPs is that the unsuccessful ones were too prescriptive, whereas you should be leaving it wide like a funnel, leaving it open for their creativity, and then funnel it down to what meets the town's needs best.
And if we get them back and there's nothing that we feel is appropriate or would be a good fit for that area, then we start over again. Nothing commits us to having to accept an RFP. But the idea would be that once we find something that fits, we get it out to the community, educate the public, get the buy-in from all the boards, and then move that single proposal forward to like a town meeting vote. And with the presentation, proposal, everything's already done ahead of time so that people can visually see what we would be proposing for that space. But that's a little bit farther down the road.
Right, because the more detail we can provide people, the less you remove that sense of uncertainty and they trust you more. So. And then we would be there in October to help you with any preparation that you need. So, and that is our presentation. Do you have any additional questions, thoughts, comments?
I want to personally thank you for taking all the time and the hard work, you and your team, for putting a lot of thought into this process. And I think some of the recommendations you're making are absolutely something we should be thinking about. So thanks for all your hard work.
You're welcome. And I know that the cost-benefit analysis that dove deeper was pretty detailed, so if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me offline or call me as well. These are all estimates, by the way. We won't know for real. I mean, these are pretty good estimates. Angie helped us from the assessor's office, but until people are actually bidding on the project, you won't have the hard numbers that you need. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for everything.
Good evening, Jack.
Good evening, folks.
How are you?
I'm reasonable.
That's good. All right.
Are we all set?
Yeah. Does anybody want this in writing? I have 2 in writing.
No, I'm good. We've got it on my computer.
I already have it.
Okay. All right. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, I am Jack McKean for the Economic Development Committee, and I'm here tonight to ask you as the board to accept the parking management plan, which is in your package, and further to direct the town administrator to implement it. The parking management plan is a follow-on to the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission parking study. And since at least 2 of you are new to the board since the parking study was accepted, I'll really brief run through here. The parking study was accepted by the board in January of last year, so it's a year. It covered both public and private spaces in the downtown, but it's worthwhile pointing out that that study was done at a point of relatively low economic activity. Open storefronts, the mill was half full, so forth and so on. And it was done with limited days of sampling in the sense of having the team go out and actually look at and measure the parking occupancy. That said, that was a Wednesday and a Saturday morning. That said, the study presented a great deal of value to the town. It discovered and measured that peak usage of our downtown parking spaces was 60%. And that was typically as you approach the evening hour, which sort of suggests retail and restaurant was really driving the amount. And at 60%, MAPC uses a threshold of 85% capacity usage as the trigger for folks, you really need to do some things thinking about your parking. So what we really have here is the opportunity, given we have adequate parking for now, to implement some of the short-term the recommendations and then prepare for some of the growth that is clearly beginning to happen in Maynard. One of the other valuable things about the study was the fairly thorough report on inadequate signage or confusing signage and the condition of the meters, a number of which the little plastic things, you literally can't read them, et cetera, et cetera. So it really was a valuable study for the community. What we did, and we being the then Assistant Town Administrator, the Police Department, and the Economic Development Committee, mounted a pilot from May of 2018 to September of 2018, and it confirmed what the study basically said. Now, confirmation was we bagged all the meters, so parking was free. And even with free parking, we did not have a capacity problem. So rather than a Wednesday and a Saturday, we had the opportunity to look all days over literally about 3.5 months. However, it also proved that meters are really a necessary and useful tool in order to keep spaces available for the customers, the clients of our downtown businesses. Officer Nyholm, who is our parking enforcement officer, was a big part of this. And because and he's quite proud of it, by the way, and I commend him for it, he really spends a great deal of his time working with the downtown merchants and their employees to kind of coach and counsel them in terms of, hey, you really should be parking over in the places where, you don't have to pay and so forth and so on. But what he noticed, because he's down there every day, we began to see the creep of employees parking at the meters, in some cases parking on the street, which was one of the major complaints from the downtown merchants in the sense of the business people are taking the spaces in front of the businesses so my customers can't get there. So the learning from that is really meters do provide a very useful service and we should keep them. Now, out of that, we decided to put together a sub-working group of the Economic Development Committee. We've been working for a number of months. We conducted some research, and with the support of the police department, basically we met with the police department or various officers and the chief 4 times. They were very helpful in trying to put this together. We also talked to town administrators or managers in a couple of other communities who have done parking studies and so forth. So the result of all of that is the parking management plan, which you have in front of you. And again, what we're really working for here is it's the logical follow-up and implementation to the municipal spaces portion of the MAPC study. Emphasis on municipal, the ones we own, we control. The MAPC study did in fact include the private spaces that are available in the downtown, but they're private. So we're only talking about the ones that the town owns and controls. And given that study and the fact that we have adequate parking at the moment, we want to take the time that we have until the growth really begins to have an impact to implement the recommendations in the plan. And there are 4 major pieces to the plan as you have it in front of you. Accept and endorse the parking philosophy as a guiding principle for municipal parking management. The town really has never put down on paper and had a philosophy. And what we're really trying to emphasize with those words is that we're not out there trying to generate revenue by more parking meters, raise the rates and so forth. We're really trying to focus on having parking available to support the businesses in downtown. If we do it right, it really becomes managing a resource for economic development, and to the degree that we have parking available, then we have more people patronizing our businesses. We will in fact raise revenue, but we're not making a revenue projection out of it, and we're trying to emphasize we're really not trying to focus on the revenue portion of it as a primary thing. The other thing under that is, standardized or purpose-based definitions. And it's kind of a simplistic process or something like that, but it basically says there'll be a few spaces which are drop-off, limited parking, 15-minute kinds of things. The bulk of the spaces which are metered will be 2 hours, and there will be non-metered spaces at the further edges of town to allow parking for business employees, long-term parking, so forth and so on. So the notion is that if we use that as a framework to shape how we go forward, we will in fact make progress. One of the biggest portions of the plan is the second piece. We're really asking that we create a parking authority. One of the things we've learned in this, it's not just the police department or the DPW. If you consider parking as a resource for economic development, it touches many different departments in town. And what we find, and there are a number of examples in the documents you have, individual decisions, well, we move this meter, we take this out, we don't put that back, signage, the whole 9 yards, that nobody's really taking an overarching view and say, is this good for economic development? So what we're really trying to do is put a very small body in place to solve short-term problems and to be the vehicle for addressing the longer-term issues. That's phase 2 of the plan, as we look at increasing growth. And the notion of a parking authority was actually suggested by Chief Du Bois. It has been endorsed by the DPW, by the town administrator, and certainly by the Economic Development Committee. The third element is to standardize meter enforcement hours. Using current meters and current rates, we're not trying to say, hey, let's jack up the rates, but if you go today and look at the meters in town, if you go over into the central parking area, it basically says Wednesdays 8 to 5, Mondays through Wednesdays 8 to 5, Thursday through Saturday. We're supposed to be enforcing until 9 p.m. It's right on the meter. So we're basically trying to standardize all of this and enforce for those hours, because we don't enforce really at the moment on Saturday. Now, the first part of my comment, standardize the enforcement hours, you have the board, as the board, have already done. And the thing, if you look at the memo you put out, parking enforcement hours, which happens to reference back to the Christmas kind of stuff, you very clearly, as the board, there is no cost for metered parking downtown after 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday. So we're basically endorsing that, standardize around that as the enforcement hours for the town. The fourth part that we're including in the plan, I mentioned that the MAPC study has a fairly long list of recommendations, short-term kinds of recommendations. And we're basically saying, go ahead and implement those. And if you look through that list, they are primarily fix the meters, fix the signage, clean up some other kinds of things in terms of where you put people, which lots do which things. And to share another thing from Officer Nyholm with you, because I sat with him and I said, Carl, what would you recommend? And the one thing that he came back to, and there was some feeling behind it, please fix the signage. His job would be a lot easier if we just cleaned up the signage and said, okay, we enforce here, post it so people understand. And that's a comment about the stuff on the meters, the signage. It's confusing in some places. It's conflicting, actually. Some of the places the MAPC had, okay, no parking, but then there's a sign there that says parking hours and so forth and so on. So from the officer who actually enforces the stuff, please, clean up the signage. You would make life easier, not only for me, the officer, but for people who come here to park. So all of that is phase one. Phase two, which is predicated on creating the parking authority, is get ready. And we identified in the plan, I think 5 or 6 or 7 things that we believe are in fact going to generate a need to take a longer-term look at this. Some of those are the mill fills up, use of the rail trail. I think the marijuana discussions we're having will certainly raise some parking kinds of things. Spillover from 129 Parker, and so there's a list of things there. The increased level of overlay district stuff in the downtown. We know the projects that are coming along in there. So clearly, we're headed for higher parking utilization, but we have the time to actually do some of these things, to clean up meters, to clean up signage, to create this authority. And so, once again, I'm asking you, accept the plan and give direction in terms of getting it implemented.
What does a parking authority mean as far as, you've done a great job explaining what you want it to do. Is it a paid position? Is it a committee? Is it a, what?
I knew you were going to ask that. The discussions we've had with the town administrator and with DPW, no more than 4 people. In effect, led by the incoming assistant town administrator as a focal point, a representative of the DPW, hopefully one that has traffic experience or a parking kind of experience. Third person would be an at-large member, either from the Economic Development Committee, or I can think of one individual town with a lot of experience that, might sign up. And the fourth person from public safety. And so all existing town positions, so it's not a paid position. It's existing set of resource, which basically can give guidance, direction, and again, emphasizing that it really is a multi-department kind of thing, and we've never kind of coordinated that before and looked at it from, okay, are we doing the right thing for economic development and helping the downtown businesses?
Do other towns do this in this way? I'm just curious how.
Yes, there are. I think Hudson has done it, and a couple of the people at the downtown summit thing I went to, there's some form of it. Sometimes it's an individual, sometimes it's a small group, and you can provide guidance to help the town administrator, or town manager, or a city council, wherever you think.
I'm in favor, so I don't know how you feel. I'm already in. And I think that's it's a smart idea, because I don't know, you guys talk to each other about the ATA being kind of the captain of that. I think that's a brilliant idea.
I guess the key, and you highlighted it, is the enforcement. And, we have limited resources with police as it is, and so is it, how do we assure that the enforcement is consistent and
Parking authority.
and appropriate? That would be my question.
It clearly is going to require the involvement of the police department. And if you look at the fact that today we have one officer from basically 7 to 3:30 or 7:30 to 3, whatever his hours are, and it doesn't cover Saturday. So part of the conversation we had with the police department, and will have to be part of putting this together, is having some form of meter enforcement on a regular basis across that period of time, and it may require that the police department either task some other officers in the off hours, or move to something like a meter maid is the usual kind of thing, but it doesn't have to be a full-time officer. It could be a meter maid kind of thing. So there is a need there to define how that's going to happen and happen most efficiently.
I did work for a police department once that they had a similar, during the week, they have an officer that was assigned to meters, and on the week, dedicated, and then on that Saturday, it was a rotating thing. So the officer's primary job would be meter enforcement, but could be pulled off if there was a call that was needed. So it was just kind of, they just kind of utilized who they had, but knowing that they'd be pulled off if they had to.
Yeah, and that's another reason, in a sense, well, related kind of thing, the importance of meters. Because at some point in this, we were having conversation about license plate readers and having to maintain a database. If the meter is there, it's, it's expired or it isn't. So the whole management process is simpler.
I know that it's something that we're gonna be having to be faced with. Carl eventually is gonna, retire, so I think that's something that the police department needs to figure out what's gonna happen from that standpoint.
We're gonna allow that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And to Jack's point, Carl serves a multitude of, tasks when he's because I've known a lot of people dealing with him. He's almost like I say ambassador too, because he's always there with the shop owners and talking to the shop owners, and they feel safe having someone around there all the time. So he serves in different
Carl is
capacities.
very proud of the fact that he is a presence for the town in the downtown area. He feels it's very important, advocated to have it continue. And yes, Carl's going to retire, so the police department has an opportunity to figure out, how do you want to do this? It's their purview to figure out how to manage it. The fact is, as we talked to the police department, they basically said, we accept that enforcement is our role. Please tell us what you want. And in effect, in the parking management plan and the standardization of the enforcement hours and so forth, we're trying to do that.
Are they buying into that? Are they buying into is the police department buying into the 8 to 5 and then 8 to 9 on Thursday to Saturday? Is that?
No.
Someone
He's
saying that?
proposing to change it to
No,
8 to 5.
that's what some of
yeah.
the meters downtown
Say-
in the
yeah.
plaza say. What we're basically saying is we're reinforcing what you have already decided
Correct.
and published, that it's 6 days a week, 8 to 5.
8 to 5, Monday through Saturday, that's what the committee's recommending.
I'll make a motion to accept the parking management plan as presented by, it's Jack's proposal, but it's by the EDC,
This is the Economic Development.
Economic Development Committee.
I'll second it.
Anybody want to beat Jack up a little more?
No.
All right, all those in favor of it?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
But
Thank you for all the work.
Yes.
There
we
was a team
accepted the
here.
plan, but we still haven't done anything about creating an authority.
Right,
We still
so
have
that's-
to, we still have to discuss, we'll discuss that off
Yeah.
in a different setting, the same, a different meeting, how we would want to go about establishing authority and who would be on it.
Correct.
So we have to do that. We didn't do that, so we've accepted the plan
plan.
in its
The proposal.
context.
Incorporated
but
into
we
it
have to
is-
now follow up at another meeting and
Implement it.
with Greg and decide how we want to appoint a committee and then what their charge will be. So we have to have all that done before so we have to do, that's our next step.
Okay.
So
In effect, you're basically, if you're accepting the implementation of the plan, you're charging the town administrator with put this together.
No, we'll put it together with him, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
what the committee's done is,
Not that we don't trust him, but
from
keep
my
an eye
perspective,
on him.
from my perspective, Chris, what he has done is just put the framework together for us.
Yeah.
So I think we're taking that now and just putting
Yeah.
the bodies in place and implement it.
Administer it.
Yeah,
Administer it.
Create the authority, charge the authority, and then,
Yeah.
Okay.
where they go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jack.
Again.
Hello.
Hey, good evening. Thank you for having us. My name is Aaron McCloskey, the Director of Public Works for the Town of Maynard. Joining me this evening is Katie Chamberlain, Senior Environmental Engineer with Stantec. We're going to be briefing the board this evening on kind of an overview of our water supply, drinking water supply. Thank you. As well as an update on the ongoing activities that have been going on within our drinking water system, treatment and distribution, as well as an update on the White's Pond project that is ongoing right now. So I'll turn it over to Katie.
All right.
Thank you.
So I think we were here, or I was here probably 8 months ago or so, doing a similar presentation, giving you just an update of all of the significant projects that Aaron and his team have had going on. So this is going to be an update to a lot of the stuff we talked about back then with some new information in there. So real quick, just what we'll talk about, an overview of the water supply system. We'll talk about the status of all the water sources and the ongoing activities that we've had going on for a while now at each of the plants, as well as some study work that we'll be doing. And then we'll go over some of the water supply versus demand issues that are happening, talk about redundancy in the system, and then we'll touch upon the new study that we just kicked off about the White Pond treatment and transmission.
Yes?
Would the young lady identify herself, please?
Hi. I'm Katie Chamberlain. I work for Stantec. We're consultants that works with Aaron on the water system. You're welcome.
Aaron did introduce her, but, okay.
So this is kind of a blurry map here that you guys can see. What's important, though, is that what this shows is that there are 3 separate well fields within the town. We have the Rockland Ave well field, which is at the north end up there. There's a filtration plant to primarily treat for iron and manganese in the water, and 3 wells, 5G, 6G, and 7G. Then you have Old Marlborough Road. There's a filtration plant there as well, and we've got 3 wells there too. Wells 1G, 2G, 3G. And then we have well 4 well field. Again, there's a filtration plant there treating for iron and manganese. And right now there's 1 well operational there and a new well being worked on right now. It's currently called 4A. And then in the middle there's 2 water storage tanks. We've got a 1.5 million gallon concrete tank and a 3 million gallon steel tank. And then down at the very south of Maynard, we have White Pond, which is not currently being used as a water source. It has in the past, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as a potential future water source as well. So a lot of words on this slide. We talked about a lot of these issues several months ago, so I'm just going to give you a quick update on some of the more significant projects that have been going on within the water system. First up, Rockland Avenue Wellfield. So this is a water treatment plant in Wellfield, been online treating water since 2002. For the greater part of the last year, there's been a lot of rehabilitation going on there at well 06G. That has come to a completion, so that's good news. It's rehabbed, the upgrades have been completed that needed to be completed, the permitting process is done. We're able to pump water, get it to the plant. The somewhat bad news is we were hoping it was going to deliver 0.5 MGD. It's really, the capacity is more like 0.2 MGD is what we're seeing. And right now we are seeing some water quality, I wouldn't call them water quality concerns actually, it's higher iron and manganese than what we've seen in the past from that well. So what that means is we just need to optimize the chemical pretreatment. We still treat for it the same way. So we're kind of working through that issue right now, and hopefully in the coming weeks, we'll have it up and running, giving you another 0.2 MGD water. And then Old Marlborough Road. So this is a water treatment plant, wellfield, been online since 1998. We've been working for a while now on some consent order driven requirements related to water quality issues coming from that plant, disinfection byproducts. We did some pilot testing. We did the design, it went out to bid, we opened those bids last week, and we're currently working on doing a recommended award for that. So you'll hear more about that very, very soon. The hope is that we get that under contract and done in the summer, July. What else? Oh, Old Marlborough Road, there's also well 3G is still not online. That's a well that we've continuously just seen poor water quality from, so we're not pumping it to the treatment plant. It poses a lot of treatment issues. So that's still a problem. Well 4, also online since 2002, one well and a treatment plant there. Currently, we're looking at adding a new well there, well 4A. The pump test has been completed. We're working on the report to kind of finalize that. After that, you have to start with the permitting activities, work with DEP. We are hoping that DEP will approve a 0.35 MGD capacity from that new well. We won't know. Maybe we'll hear back by the end of the year. We're hopeful. But once we hear back from that, then you have to design upgrades to the plant and to the well field to get that up and running. So that'll be a little bit longer before well 4A is even on the radar. So then we talk about White Pond. So those were the groundwater resources. White Pond is the one surface water supply that the town has access to. They've actually had exclusive, or you have had exclusive rights to the water since 1888. It's in Stowe and Hudson. It had previously been used as a water supply for the town, but once the new surface water treatment rules came into play, it was going to result in pretty expensive upgrades to the plant. The decision was made to not move forward with it and to move forward with the groundwater treatment. So what that means is you potentially do have this other source of water available to you, up to almost potentially 1 MGD of water. So it's not insignificant. What it would need is new treatment and a new transmission main to get it to Maynard. So this new project that we're kicking off is the White Pond Treatment and Transmission Study, looking at the details of what it would take to do it. So this, well, I'm sorry you can't see it on the TV, folks. It's a little blurry, but this is a similar slide that we showed the last time we were here, pretty much just summarizing the existing water supply in Maynard in comparison to the demand. So what you're seeing here, the orange and blue lines are the average day demand, and that's the current demand and then the proposed future demand, or the estimated future demand in 2035. And then the red and purple line is the estimated future maximum day demand and the current maximum day demand. So we're talking about 1 MGD for your average day demand and about 1.5 for your maximum day. So what you see here, the first 3 columns are the Rockland Ave, Old Marlborough Road, and well 4 well fields. And the green portion of that bar represents the current average treatment capacity at those plants. The yellow portion represents unavailable pumping capacity. So unavailable in the sense that it's water that when that plant was originally designed, it was thought that you could treat that much water, but now because of water quality concerns or the wells are down for rehab, whatever, you're not able to access that capacity. So what you can see in the far right columns is when you add up all of those resources, you have enough to meet your average day demand, but you do not have enough to meet your max day demand. And then the far right column is if we were to take out the largest water treatment plant, let's just say there was an emergency, some sort of natural disaster, and Rockland Ave goes down. You don't have enough capacity to meet your average or your max day demand. So this is just pretty much a summary of what I said, but I'll state it again. So right now, you do have the ability to meet your current average day demand with all of your existing well sources operating, as they do today, but you're unable to meet your maximum day demand. But if the largest treatment plant were to go down for any reason, you're unable to meet your average or your max day demand. So, what does that mean? Well, it means you need an additional 0.4 MGD to meet your average day demand, or an additional 1 MGD of water to meet your maximum day demand. So this all kind of ties into the water ban, right? Like, we need to kind of manage your demand to match your supply. And that's kind of where we ended up with needing to issue the water ban, yeah. So in the future, what do you do about this, right? So you do have a bunch of options, right? You've got your 3 well fields. You do have some wells that are currently being, you've got the well 6G that's being rehabbed. That should be up and running soon. That's another 0.2 MGD. You've got the new well 4A that hopefully will be approved by DEP in a reasonable amount of time for the expected capacity of 0.35 MGD. So that gets you a little bit of the way there. You'd at least be able to meet your average day demand, even if your largest plant went down. But you'd still be missing a big chunk to meet that max day demand, which would be, in the middle of the summer, let's say. So you also have this White Pond source that has been out there. It's yours to use, and it is potentially up to 1 MGD. So that could solve a lot of problems if need be. So with that said, Aaron and us at Stantec, we just kicked off this White Pond study. So we're going to be looking at, what would it take to treat water from White Pond and transmit it to town, right? So I kind of just summarized what I feel the main objectives are from this study. First and foremost, the most important thing is to really determine how the town can best meet their long-term water demands. So both your average day and your max day with redundancy in place, so that if an emergency did happen, any one of your plants went down, you would still be able to meet all of your demands. So then the other 2 objectives are determining the feasibility of using White Pond for a source of drinking water. So what would it take to actually treat it? And then determining the feasibility and potential other options for transmitting water from White Pond to the town. So kind of doing an engineering analysis, feasibility study, cost-benefit analysis, stuff like that. I'm not going to go through the details of this slide, but I just wanted to kind of give you a quick summary of what the tasks are that are included in this study. I think it will actually be pretty interesting and give you guys some interesting information to ponder when it comes to your supply and demand and redundancy issues, things that you can really chew on and think about. So the first task is really just collecting all the existing data and reports that are out there. Like, for instance, the citizen report on White Pond that was done. That was a really impressive study. I've read it. There's a lot of work that went into it, so we don't want to ignore previous reports that have been developed. So we're going to try to dig up all the reports we can, all the water quality data we can, pull it all together, and then first thing we'll do is we'll look at the water supply versus demand and try to figure out, all right, what is the true future needs of the town? How much water do you need, and what are the potential options to get there? It might be a combo of some groundwater rehab, some surface water at White Pond. We don't know. We'll have to do the math to figure it out. And so then after we know exactly what it is that we're talking about needing for future treatment, then we'll look into evaluating White Pond. So just from a water quality perspective, communicating with DEP, what would it actually take to treat that water? What would it cost? What does the treatment process look like? What would be the size of a building? Where would we site that building? Any issues associated with that building? And that would include some basic cost estimates and alternative analysis. There's plenty of ways to treat surface water. So, we'll have to do some thinking and some alternative analysis, cost benefit, situation. And then, like I mentioned, we'll also have to evaluate the transmission main to get the water from White Pond to the town. There was a transmission main. It exists. From what I understand, it's not usable. So, we'd be looking at, do we just put a transmission main in the same location, or is there a better option? So we'll be looking into some of those options as well. And then along the way, we'll be identifying any permitting needs, environmental concerns associated with particularly that transmission main, easement issues, stuff like that. And we'll be identifying any issues that would need to be addressed. And then real quick, the schedule. So like I said, we just kicked this off last week. We think this will be a 6-month effort. At the end of it, you'll see a final report, and we'll give you guys an update as we go along. Oh, and one other thing, I think one of the first deliverables will be this evaluation of your supply versus your demand, and that really ties into the water ban. And I know there's probably some concern of what do we do about that. So I think that'll be the first chunk of technical information that will be really helpful to Aaron and the town.
And right now, we're in a phase where Maynard's growing pretty rapidly, right? We have a couple big developments that are scheduled to come online that we know of, potential ones future. The mill with their current capacity, and we're factoring in all of those potential uses when we're looking at long-term usage, so.
Yeah, and 129 is going to come up pretty fast. Too.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Do you have any understanding why the new well over at Rockland is generating half of what was anticipated? And is there any remedy, human remedy, for that?
I don't think we do we, Gary?
I'm Gary McCarthy from Stantec as well, and that we tried a number of different techniques to improve the capacity of that well. There was had 2 different well drillers in there, and it's we feel like we've gotten as much as we can out of it. It was videotaped as well. There's some really significant. It's a rock well. There's some significant breaks in the rock, which allows the water in, and we're just not getting what we expected out of it. We turned the pump on, and the water level drew down pretty low. And so we're running it, I think most recently they ran it maybe 120 gallons a minute, something like that. We were hoping to get 150 or more out of it. So we're going to run it for a while at the 120. Like Katie said, make a few adjustments at the water treatment plant to handle that quality water, and see maybe if we might be able to get more from it in the future. So.
Okay.
All set?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is the contract for the Kenyon pipeline inspection.
We've got Aaron again.
Aaron's here. We got 2 more for Aaron. This one's a motion, make a motion to approve the contract and agreement with Kenyon Pipeline Inspection LLC for the construction of the 2018 sewer rehabilitation in the amount of $413,221. Do we have a second?
Second.
Aaron?
Yep. Good evening. Again, Aaron McCloskey, Director of Public Works, and what you have before you is a contract and a memo requesting that the board recommend authorizing the contract as presented. The town of Maynard has worked with Stantec Consulting and completed a 5-year I&I program that was presented last year. We attended town meeting, requested a $1 million bond from the Sewer Enterprise Fund to fund sewer capital improvements. So this is one of the projects that we wanted to fund with that funding source. The specifics of the project include mechanical root removal of 8-inch and 10-inch pipes throughout the system, heavy cleaning of 8-inch and 10-inch pipes, excavated point repairs, so replacement of pipe in the ground, cutting off laterals, lining of 8-inch pipe, lining of 10-inch pipe, and manhole rehabilitation. Throughout town, areas of work include Sudbury Street, Park Street, Percival Street, Main Street, Arthur Street, DeMar Street, Roosevelt Street, McKinley Street, Railroad Street, and Beacon Street for just over 6,000 feet of linear repair throughout town. So We've worked with Stantec, we put the project out to bid. Yeah, we got a lot of very competitive bids in. Worked with Stantec again to work through those bids and found that Kenyon's construction pipeline bid was in order, and do recommend moving forward with the repairs and authorizing the contract.
Okay. Any questions on that one?
Just quick clarification. Did you say 6,000 feet?
Correct.
And is that basically pipe replacement?
It's either pipe replacement or pipe lining.
The reason I bring that up is to show the significant exposure or value of our piping. If we don't, we don't know, we have 60 miles in town, or whatever the number of miles is that we have of piping throughout town, and if it's $413,000 for 6,000 feet, looking at the replacement cost of our entire line throughout town is millions of dollars.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
question for information. What sewer rehabilitation are we speaking of here?
Throughout town.
He just went through the list of
Went through the
streets.
Just read the list of streets.
He just mentioned all the streets, Vic.
Well, I have a little
Yeah.
problem.
But it's areas throughout the entire town. It's
Is
across.
this related to
town-
129 Parker Street?
No.
No, it's not.
No.
This is town-wide other things.
This was the project that was presented at town meeting last May.
No?
It's not 129
Not
Parker.
129 Park Street, no.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions you have? David?
No, I'm good.
No.
Justine?
No, it looks like it's going to go through the winter, almost into the winter, though.
Yeah.
212 days, that's a long time.
That's a long time.
We're laying sewer pipe right now. It's
I
middle of
know.
winter, so,
I
yeah.
know.
You already started.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
All right, so all those in favor of Kenyon pipeline inspection? Dave's toasting. Toasting you with fresh water.
Good water.
Nice.
That's appropriate.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
Is it clean water?
the next
It's
one is
clean.
the Vanessa Hang and Breslin, Inc. contract. And the motion is to move to approve the contract with Vanessa Hang and Breslin, Inc. for the professional public works on-call engineering services and continuation of professional services in the amount of $200,000. To the second.
Second?
Aaron,
Yes.
what's this one?
So this contract is a on-call engineering services contract. So the town has contracted with VHB for a number of years now. Our full-time town engineer is a VHB employee. We utilize VHB services for a wide range in the town of Maynard. Attached Exhibit A of the contract lists all of the services that they have provided in the past for the town of Maynard: transportation, planning, engineering related services, land development related services, planning and design related services, and environmental related services. So this would just be a 2019 on-call service contract for VHB. The fee schedule changed, $5 per hour as compared to the 2018 contract. And the idea would be that the maximum amount set not to exceed annually would be $200,000 and could be extended annually for up to 3 years.
Do you know what the, what percentage increase $5 per hour is?
I was trying to figure that out.
It would have been,
I don't see another dollar amount to
Yeah.
put next.
2.7%.
2.7?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
We have a dollar figure on this contract?
Maximum of $200,000.
Thank you.
What was our maximum not to
to exceed.
exceed on the
Not to
prior contract?
I don't believe it was written as a not to exceed in the previous contract. I think it was just a service contract, so I wanted to throw that in there just to
Yeah, we
a little
updated.
protection for the town.
We took a look at the contract language and made sure it was updated. And that's what this reflects.
So
In
if,
addition to allowing them to negotiate for higher, that's what we opened up to.
so if we require services that are beyond that amount, is this a maximum we'll pay, or do they then have to come to us for additional fees, additional funds through
Right, we would, because we've only budgeted for that amount, so it would
Yeah,
have to
so
be
we'd have to
appropriated
come through
beyond.
through some sort of other funding mechanism.
That's right, but well before we got to that point, we keep a track of what services they provide. And just as we've discussed it, other projects, if it's something that is being imposed on the town, so to speak, we have that project pay for the services. But in my opinion, although you haven't asked it, but in my opinion, we get a good bang for our buck with VHB. You might see Wayne Amico, the town engineer downstairs, but he, for the cost of $200,000 a year, he provides the full firm's worth of resources. And
I was going to ask, does that include him? Does that include?
Correct. He's in there.
So specifically, Wayne Amico is the on-call engineer. So typically what we do is we have an on-call similar to what we have with other engineering firms. If we have an on-call service contract, that covers the on-call services that we need. If we have a larger project, like for example, the Mass Works project we're doing, that would be a separate, smaller contract that would be paid for separately. It'd have a more detailed scope of services. For example, like if we do a design project at Fowler School, that was a separate scope of services that was put together for that one. Or if we were to have another larger project, it's a chunk of money, let's say $100,000 worth of engineering services for a specific sewer project or a roadway improvement project, that would be a separate contract I would bring before the board.
So basically, this is what almost Wayne's, salary, but
no,
to a degree.
I want to
No?
clarify. The
Okay.
point I was trying to make is, in addition to Wayne, it's not just Wayne.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like when Wayne is a civil engineer, I believe.
Correct.
But VHB is composed of engineers from all different backgrounds and services. So
The resource.
I sent an email to Wayne, but Wayne is actually asking
Gotcha.
all the different
She's
engineers.
using the resource, basically.
Bingo.
Correct.
Bingo. So yeah.
And the purpose of my question was to verify, and I think I understand, that it does not cap our exposure for VHB services at 200,000, because if they utilize more, if something goes up, and
Oh,
we
sure.
need to utilize them for more,
Absolutely.
you have to come back to
Yes,
us
we
to
would.
fund it more.
Absolutely. And and I would have, there would be some explaining that have to be done. Yeah. We're tight.
Okay. Any other questions about VHB? All those in favor? All right. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
For your
Thank you.
several inputs this evening. Now we're on to Powder Mill and the hallway. Good evening, sir.
Hello. No, I don't have my copy of the hard copy.
It's up to you.
Is that right?
I don't need you to. I can take notes.
But I can, is it the last one that he went through?
I hear you're writing $200,000 checks.
In case you're ready.
Trying to get in on that?
You better bring Lisa back for that one. So what we did at our last meeting, which was actually last week, was we made sure that the five of us had a copy of your latest and greatest of redlined edition, so we were all looking at the same document, just to be sure.
Yes.
And then I guess we would go down, and anybody that has any questions about, these items, or if anyone has any other issues they'd like to address that aren't addressed in redline, that we would do that this evening, and then, present that to Joel at the next meeting, which I believe is the 19th. So,
All right.
anybody like to start, or?
Well, yeah, and this might be not an easy question, but I look at your first comment, AJC 1, and you comment on the fact that, this raises some issues of concern. And I guess my concern for this evening is, how do we prevent what you are saying could result? I don't see language that's been changed that we can look at tonight that addresses the concern that you have, to make sure that it's been adjusted. Is there a new set of language here, or you follow my question?
I do, and there isn't. Let me maybe provide some background as to what my marching orders were, at least what I received through the town administrator. I wasn't wasn't your last meeting, but 2 or 3 meetings ago, when you had a substantive discussion about the last iteration of the MOA.
Yep.
I got a summary of that meeting from the town administrator. I subsequently reviewed the video of that meeting, or at least the portion of it, when you discussed the project, and got a compiled list, partly from the administrator and partly my additions, of what I gathered were your concerns, your requests. They weren't entirely consistent among you. Each of you had different thoughts, and what I attempted to do in this version was incorporate all of those, understanding that some of them might have even been in conflict with one another. And in incorporating those, it created some sort of internal conflict within the document. So an example would be what you've touched upon here and what prompted my first comment, which is you're now suggesting that the sewer service would not be provided by the town of Maynard. And so I've eliminated all the references, and you can see my red line modifications throughout the document to the town of Maynard's responsibility to provide sewer service. However, going back to the base document with which I'm working here, to which I'm making these red line modifications, you had required a financial contribution that was substantially premised on the fact that the town of Maynard was going to be providing the sewer service. And you had indicated that sewer impacts, as were previously detailed in section 3D of the agreement, were going to be 1,968 plus or minus areas relining 84 feet by plus 61 feet, a total of $450,000. My question in my remark and my comment was, am I eliminating that reference altogether such that the town of Maynard is no longer expecting a $450,000 contribution because you're not providing that sewer service any longer? Or are you still asking for that sort of monetary goodie from the developer? And if you are, what are we tying it to? What's the justification for it? If you want to say, write me a check, write the town of Maynard a check for, $1.2 million, you've got to justify within the document why it is you're asking for that sum, or what you intend to use that sum for. And previously, $450,000 of it was dedicated towards sewer improvements. I suppose you could still make some of those sewer improvements, but it's a difficult justification when you're saying to the project, we're not providing you with the sewer capacity, but please improve our sewer lines.
Well, so the question I have for that is, or the counter I have for that is, this was their proposal after they took sewer off the table. Is they were the ones who offered the $450,000 of sewer impacts, even though they had taken sewer off the table. So is it our job to then turn around and say, never mind?
Is that the case?
Yeah.
That they were offering the sewer monies after they removed
Yes, this is the updated. The one before was sewer impacts plus a jetter truck plus bleachers plus a lot more. So this is after what was taken off.
So certainly it's not your job, and I guess that goes to David's point, or to his question, which was, is it our job to, or is there language here that you propose? Is it our job to propose that language? I guess the answer is no. I was not appreciating the sequencing there. If they've provided this proposal subsequent to them taking the sewer off the table, and they're still offering $450,000 for sewer upgrades, then
Well,
excellent.
they referenced the fact that they recognized that some of our infrastructure would still be utilized. But at that point, and this is, correct me, anybody on the board, at that point, I thought that they were under the assumption that we were providing sewer and water to the Maynard portion of the project. And
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And that the Acton portion was going to be handled by the
The tank.
by Acton
Yeah.
sewer. And they were going to do their deal with Acton, whatever it happened to be. And that we were going to be, and then during our discussion, at some point, it was brought up, well, why don't we tell them to do the entire project with Acton's water and sewer, since they were so kind to tell us that we were going to give them the sewer before they asked. And I think that's where we got to where we were. That's my. Yeah.
I tend to agree that's true, Selectman Gavin, because, right, otherwise I would have had the same sort of questions as to how I'd be able to justify that in case they asked. But, right. But either way, I also concur with Selectman Justin St. John's notion, which is if it was in there and they were okay with it in the first place, who are we to tell them not to put it in? So, and that is a question I have for you, Attorney Costa, is regardless of what they say, regardless of whether it's legally justifiable, whatever the mitigation funds are, if it's in there and they agree to it, it could be for whatever they have. But if they agree to that, then
And I think to your point, we'll leave it in there and let's see what they come back with.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm sure you go ahead and finish.
no, that's it. I
finish
think
your
like who would hold us, like who would question us if it was already agreed to amongst both parties?
That's a fair point. I mean,
Okay.
two private parties, or in this case, a public party and a private party, can contract with respect to anything that's agreeable to them both.
Okay, like DHCD wouldn't say, no, you can't throw that in there.
DHCD will have no oversight authority over the MOA.
Okay, all right.
My only concern was number 3 there, because you highlighted that also, that section where basically if they appeal to the zoning board of appeals, they could say, I'll take, this is not going on the table anymore, so we're not going to be paying you that kind of money anymore, so.
And-
I'm concerned with that, to leave that in there, so if there's a way for us to take the number 3 out of there altogether, that paragraph, and not, say, let's not leave it in the proposal.
Yes, so I think I see what you're referencing, and there are actually multiple references to
Yes,
it within the
yeah,
document.
correct, yes.
And I have redlined them, I have removed the applicable language. To me, to the extent that I don't have a vote, but to the extent that you're deferring to my recommendation, that's a deal breaker for me. The idea that you would sign a memorandum of agreement with all these commitments made by a developer, but if there's an appeal, particularly an appeal entirely outside of your control by some third party, which frankly could be orchestrated by the developer itself, that could therefore render the entire agreement null and void at a point when you've already approved the project, that's a deal breaker. It's sort of a red herring in an agreement of this sort. So I've stricken that language. I think that shouldn't be too difficult of a negotiation with the developer. I've seen many of these agreements. That sort of language is not typical. So I've stricken it. It concerns me too.
Thank you. I have a question about, Aaron just went through his discussion about, 2 different companies that we signing contracts with that are basically in town just to help us through our difficulties with sewer and water and pipes and everything. And we heard earlier from Stantec's representative about White's Pond and some of our other water needs and difficulties. If we go into this MOA and we, they do the impacts, is there any language that we can put in here that, protects us in the event that we find that other things that they haven't detailed? Because in this, they're very specific that it's 1,968 feet of relined pipe for a total of $450,000. If there's other issues that arise during the construction that need their attention, how do we protect the town? So even though there may not be a dollar amount, but that the developer is responsible for those costs as well, over and above the 450.
Sure. So part of the challenge with a memorandum of agreement is striking the balance between the sort of specificity that you want and the information that you've got before you at this earliest stage in the proceedings. One thing that I dislike about even the version that I've now prepared of this document, and I suspect this will change through the further negotiation, is I've tried to sketch out the sort of project that you all indicated, and I think there was consensus on this point, that you want to see in terms of the height of the buildings, number of units. But what I'd really prefer to see, and frankly what the developer needs to create if it were to sign a document of this sort, even before it submits its LIP application, are new project plans that show what that project looks like. That smaller project with reduced heights and fewer units and whatnot, the redesign. So it's sort of poor practice to sketch out, for example, I'm looking specifically on page 2 of the red line document, under the terms of agreement, item A, beneath residential apartments, I cite to the project plans, and then I say, but revised as follows. And then I try to box them in by describing the manner in which they've got to revise their plans. what should really occur is they should revise their plans through this process before we finalize the agreements, show them to you. You rubber stamp them and say, that's what we're okay endorsing. And then we eliminate all the red text I've added into section 3 and simply reference the new plans. Well, I think the same thing goes for improvements.
I agree with you, and that's why I'm somewhat confused in that, rather than, and I know we had talked about going back to them with a full and complete new MOU, or MOA, however we want to say it. But if they're not even willing to listen and agree to our request for 35-foot height limitation, the rest of it is a waste of everybody's time. If they're not willing to reduce the number of units, the rest of it is a waste of everybody's time. So shouldn't the question be proposed to them hey, look, here's where we're coming from. We want a 35-foot limit, and we want based on just engineering, there would presumably be lesser units. Let's see a different plan. And I think we've asked them for that. They said, I remember several meetings ago, Joel, when he was sitting there, we asked him if they had prior plans. He said they had prior plans. I asked if we could see them, and he said they got rid of them, or they no longer have them. So that, I think, was part of our discussion the last time we had a serious discussion on this, was let's see another iteration of a plan that might meet some of our objections or our concerns.
At least move in the right direction.
At
the very least, because if we talked about this in our last meeting, and he's kind of reluctant to address the height issue, address the unit numbers, and we kind of talked about it last week. Then, if he's got to at least come back with us with some movement. Will we get the number that we want exactly? Maybe, maybe not. But he has to at least show that he's willing to negotiate in our direction. I would think, if he says no to that, then we just have to say, it's going to be a pretty easy vote to say, then file the 40B.
I think that's right. And I didn't mean to suggest that I thought this was a poor approach. I think that this would be a poor final document with the red line edits incorporated to sign. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea, now that we've got this, with the elimination of my comments, to present this and to say, review this document, and this is more what we're thinking, because very often developers want to see the big picture. It may be that in order for them to, for example, reduce the height and reduce the overall number of units, they need to cut costs elsewhere. So we may get a response that says, we see that, we think we may be able to work with that, maybe not to the extent you like, but closer to what you like. But we're also looking at this section 3D that speaks to 50,000 for traffic impacts and 450 for sewer, and we can't do all of that if we're also reducing the density as significantly as you like. So there are a lot of moving parts here where it may be a bit of a give and take in terms of what they're willing to put on the table by way of a mitigation package, if they're also trying to reduce the overall size and scope of the project. I don't know. I've been involved in enough of these that I don't think it's a bad idea to give them the full picture in terms of what you're expecting and see what they come back with. But I think you're absolutely right. If they come back and say there is no movement on the height, there is no movement in the unit count, you have your answer, don't you?
Yeah, so to David's point, should we put that language in there in regards?
It's in there.
Yeah.
It's in there. It's in the bottom of page 2.
But it does also say that, so you taking that out, that's right, because the red line ones, you're recommending you taking those out.
Right. My red line modifications speak at the bottom of page 2 to the total number of units and bedrooms, and then it talks about maximum building height. It talks about an increased front yard setback. It talks about the affordability. So all of that's in there. It talks about the local preference. All of that is now worked into the document. And we've kept in, and again, I'll eliminate my comments, we've kept in the traffic mitigation monies, the sewer mitigation monies, the crosstown connect mitigation monies. That's all still in.
I personally would like to try to raise, if we're talking about other mitigations, I would actually really would like to raise the traffic improvements, only because, that is something concretely. We know that that signal at Waltham and Parker is an issue. in general, and when you're going to add all of these people, there are going to be a lot of people who, you know, come into Maynard, which is great, but that intersection will probably need help. And I don't think 50,000 is going to do it. I think that's what they are.
No, that'll put up a new
Traffic
light.
lights. Well, I think that he has to, you know, to Adam's point, if you come back with a new plan, it's gonna require a new traffic plan. And I think, you know, there's nobody sitting here that I'm aware of that would agree with a traffic study that says you're gonna add this number of people throughout the day to that location on Powder Mill Road and not increase traffic flow to have an effect on traffic flow. And that's what that's what the last traffic study said, there are no traffic impacts. Well, that's a little bit counterintuitive, but they're gonna need to, you know, to Justine's point, come back and tell us, you know, we know there are gonna be traffic adjustments to be made. And there's also the question that we've got, you know, correspondence now from the town of Concord, and, you know, they want the light that goes the other way back towards Route 2 address at least as far as, you know, the first light, and they want us to address traffic impacts all the way to Route 2, which, you know, do we or don't we, that's a whole different set of discussions, but at the very least, they have to address the issue of cars turning right and going down towards, you know, downtown Maine at the intersections of Parker Street and Waltham Street. And to suggest that there's gonna be no traffic impacts is really kind of silly, but.
So I guess that's what I had hoped, or the discussion that I hoped to sort of spur by the comment number one that you'd made reference to before, when I questioned these sewer impact monies. What I'd like to avoid in the negotiation, and again, I wasn't appreciating the sequence, although it sounds like maybe the sequence was sort of what I thought it was to begin with, which is at the time that we last got a version of this MOA, the reason for the continued reference to sewer impacts is because they were at least anticipating using some portion of Maynard's system
I
for
think
their
that's
project.
I apologize.
When we now come back and say we don't want any portion of your project to be on the Maynard system, this is a red herring for them. They're going to see the sewer impacts and they're going to say, then why are we paying you to improve your sewer? And yes, you can contract anything, but realistically, they're going to say it doesn't make sense. If there are other uses for that money, I'd rather work those into the version of the agreement now, rather than have them strike the 450, and then I go back and now I try to justify another use for the 450. Now suddenly, water supply and demand that you just saw in your previous study requires a donation of $50,000 on their part. Traffic now jumps from 50 to 100. I'd rather incorporate those numbers now. Go in with them and say, listen, we're not asking you for 450 for sewer because you're not using sewer. Maybe we still expect that they contribute something to sewer as a showing of good faith. Let's cut that in half and make it 225. But let's make up the other 225 with another 100,000 toward traffic impacts and 125 toward, you know, water demand.
Yeah, I don't have any type of concept myself as to how much traffic improvements. If Aaron were here, he'd be able to help us with that. And $100,000, you know, in your pocket sounds like a lot of money, but $100,000 to do a project on the roads gets you the striping down the middle and the light pole. You know, that's basically it.
Right.
I think VHB did studies for, when I had been in with the capital planning thing, they had gone to every intersection in town to try to try to look, and they had estimated, I believe it was about $250,000 per intersection.
And it's not just intersections when you were
The
talking about.
sidewalks we're talking about too.
Yeah, well, there's the whole complete
The whole
streets,
area,
the
yeah,
whole
completely,
complete
yeah.
streets aspect that I believe has to be part of the incorporated aspect outside of any additional quote-unquote gift to the town or mitigation money, because that's part of our obligation under any new development that comes into town. We expect them to meet our complete streets. So that, to me, is pay to play. Then above that, you've got these other aspects of what, as a result of having the project and the complete streets, what the impact is that Justine's talking about, not only at the Waltham Street location, but you know, at their front door, which again is pay to play, the front door aspect, where they were talking about a stripe down the middle of the road. There's a lot more to that, but that's front door stuff that I think should be on them outside of any agreement, because we just tell them, you have to do it to our satisfaction, and that's that's outside of any agreement as to what's coming to the town.
And some of that does exist or will exist. I mean, the challenge, of course, in the 40B context is that the sorts of things that, would typically be pay to play,
Yeah.
they can seek waivers from as part of the
Correct.
ZBA process. And once it's out of your hands, it's out of your hands. It's in
Yes.
front of the ZBA. So that's the challenge that exists. Now, there is a standard to apply. They have to establish that complying with the pay to play rule in any given circumstance would render their project uneconomic. Probably tough to do if the pay to play is $100,000 or $150,000 on a multi-million-dollar project. But you're also putting entirely your faith in the ZBA to stand firm on that point. And you're hoping that it doesn't get challenged and the HAC doesn't overturn it. So there are some risks involved, but that's just the reality of 40B. And you've got to weigh the possible benefits on the table through the LIP process, assuming they're able to meet any of your other demands, against the risk that exists if they were to go the more traditional 40B route and what you'd be able to get through the ZBA process anyway.
So maybe to your point then, should we just come up with a pool of money that we think we could utilize them for whatever we deem, necessary to apply to? Is that what you're recommending?
I guess what I'm saying is, I know that a lot went into this, and I wasn't a party to it, but there was a discussion that resulted in these financial contributions. I mean, the financial contribution section, which flows over into traffic improvements and mass transit and historic homes, goes on for the better part of 3 or 4 pages here, and there's some detail as to how these monies were going to be used. I didn't work on that. In fact, I don't think Greg even worked on that. That was, under Andrew, I think.
According to them, they made up those numbers based on
haven't worked on
conversations that had been held during discussion groups. That's what they claim.
Okay.
So none of us apparently know where those numbers came from.
Well, yeah, I never met, I don't know, he says he met with our historic commission and those folks to discuss the 2 homes, certainly weren't conversations he had with us, or even our small working group. Some of those things in those 2 pages or 3 pages you referenced,
Yes.
they didn't come from those conversations. Those were separate conversations he apparently had with other people, which would be, Andrew and Kevin maybe, I don't know. But it wasn't
Maybe.
with the group in whole.
No,
or in
and
total.
it wasn't me.
No, I know that too. That I
And
really
likewise,
know.
Andrew and Kevin denied having any conversations with them as well. So I don't know whether, based on what they've told us, those numbers came from, well, we had these conversations and this is just what we.
Yeah, like mass transit. It's very specific in there, in the mass transit piece. In our conversation as a working group, the conversation I was part of, that at some point we would talk about a contribution towards the Crosstown Connect, but nothing as specific as this, so I don't know where he got that language.
And so I guess to Armand's point, you can be as specific or as general as you wish in an MOA. I've seen MOAs that go on for pages and pages dictating the sort of mitigation that's going to be performed by the town utilizing the funding, or in some instances, that is going to be performed by the developer at the developer's expense. I've seen other MOAs that consist of a half-page summary that says, you're writing us a check for $2 million, and here's a general sense as to how we're going to use it. So you can do it either way, but there needs to be some justification for why the money's being requested and how it's going to be used.
You may recall, Adam, I think you were here at the meeting when Attorney Levine was here, and he seemed to be suggesting that his group didn't want to get into talking about where the specific money would go to. He was talking about just ask us for a sum of money and you do with it what you wish, which is the other alternative. But the concern with that, I think, from many perspectives, is that the town doesn't want to have it come into the general fund and then have it go, instead of being taking care of the issues that we need to have taken care of in this, to go to fund other things that, are outside of the scope of this particular project, perhaps. I
Right.
think that's part of the concern, too. And so to protect, and I don't want to say the town, but to protect the fact that we need to have some of this stuff done in order to make it safe or to make it viable for us as a community, we can't have that money being diverted elsewhere. So that's, I think, partly why it was hopeful to be somewhat directed. That's just my sense.
Yeah. The other issue that we've been involved in the past in MOAs and these type of things has been the timing of payments. And
When they go.
we never had any discussions about timing. So the timings in this document are not our timings, they're, timings that, I think Joel would prefer, but, I don't think I agree with some of the timings that he has either.
Some of them are questionable, some of them are more reasonable. I mean, the idea that, for example, under financial contribution on page 3, upon the issuance of permits at the very bottom of the page, expiration of all appeal periods without appeal, or termination of appeals and commencement of construction, the owner will pay $250,000. I mean, that's a fairly traditional clause. Certainly you can't expect, and no developer, certainly none I've ever represented, would write a check for $250,000 for a project that they're not going to end up building. So the idea that permits have issued and appeal periods have expired is pretty typical. But when you start getting into upon the issuance of the X number of building permit or certificate of occupancy, you run into some challenges here because projects stall, developers go belly up, and you want to be sure you're getting your money and you're getting it early enough. But if it's a substantial sum, if you're talking hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, you also got to give the developer an opportunity to start, gaining some return on investment on its money so that it can start writing the checks to the town. So it's a bit of a balancing act.
Okay, I'm okay with it, I just know that they're, some of them don't kind of fit where we've had them fit before, that's all.
Can I just say, and I know it's only 9:15, so we're not along with this, but my concern is this conversation, which is healthy and good to get at, but I don't want to have us in a situation where we think we're going to get through this entire thing with a discussion like this so that Joel can be here next meeting. I don't think that's going to happen. Because I want to see what we talk about tonight, I want to see in writing so that then we can talk about it and make sure it matches what our thought process was
okay.
and everything else. So I don't want to be in a false situation where we're pushing to get through this evening so that Joel can be here at our next meeting when we have a lot more to talk about, obviously, than.
And then Melissa could be here too.
And Melissa has a chance to look at it as well, so I just want to make sure that, I make my concern.
I'm with you on that. It depends on what.
Yeah, there's no rush, I mean, there's no.
Exactly.
And I will say that sort of comes full circle to what was said 15 minutes ago, which is to what extent you want to continue to work on this document. We can go through 2, 3, 4, I can put 5 more drafts of this together for you, only to hand it over for them to say, we're not adjusting the density, we're not reducing the height, and then what for? So, one thing that might be considered is going back to the checklist, and we could even refer back to my exchange of emails with Greg of your wish list, and presenting that to Joel and to Lou, and say, this is what we're expecting, or this is our wish list. We're asking for a reduction in height, a reduction in units, an increase in setback. We're still asking for the financial mitigation to be on the table. We've got to work through some of the details in terms of what that amount would be and how it would be divided up and for what purposes. Is that something you can work with? And if you get a definitive
That should be
no,
a starter, because if you know nothing else, it's a non-starter, so that should be where we should be starting at.
right.
No, I agree. There's other issues there, too, that I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
So how do we want to proceed? It may make sense to tell them, look, we have a lot more work to do to devise our own MOA in response, but one of the tenets of it's going to be that if you don't agree to a reduction in size or in height, we're not going to get anywhere anyway. So is that something you're willing to talk about? And if so, should we proceed? If not, that's a key component to what we want to do going forward. So we may be already at an endpoint, and we'd also like to see some other designs if if you can present them to us. You know,
I remember Greg when I asked him, can he go back to the drawing board, and he said, no.
yeah, that's right. He said,
Yeah, he said no.
He has to say no, but you don't have a choice.
But I think to your point, Dave, this is an exercise in futility, because we're spending all this time, and if we don't know what is it that they're thinking, but we need to propose to them, this is what we want. That's to us, that's where we start, that's our starting point. Then we could put together everything else.
So then,
Well,
so I'm kind of confused, because do we put everything together and then,
No.
or do we still have him come in 2 weeks
No,
and
you
present
shouldn't,
this?
there's no reason for him to come in, but I think
Or
to
we
Adam's
just
point, he
present.
should, maybe he will reach out to him and say, this is what, this was our wish list originally, and that's what we want to start with.
Right, I mean, I would say that I could do this one of three ways, sort of from the most simplistic to the more complex. I can pick up the phone and call Lou and say, here's the deal. It's about the height. Can you reduce the height and maybe adjust the setback a bit? Is that an option or not? If the answer is no, then I don't think we have a whole lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Option two is I put a list together, get something that'll go in a PDF or an email and say, here's the wish list. And it'll include height. It'll include some of the financial incentives as well, continuing to be a part of the agreement. Option three is, not that I would even need to do this, but eliminate the 2 or 3 comments I've got here in the margin and say, here's our working document. It's a public document anyway. It's here at the meeting tonight. Maybe Lou's got it already. I don't know.
He does. He
Okay.
does. It's a public document, and he asked me for
Well, right.
it, so.
Right. So I can say, you've seen the working document. You've seen what we've got in it. I mean, I guess I can just have a conversation if he's already got it. You've seen the working document. You know what it says. Is this a deal breaker? Or do we have, is there an ongoing conversation to be had?
does he have the red line comments too?
Yeah, he asked me for it.
Okay.
Oh, I'm okay with,
Yeah.
I'm okay with 1, 2, and 3. I mean, I'm okay with 1. I mean,
One, I think to me,
it-
that's the simplest way, it's
I think we agreed last time.
lawyer
you
to
know,
lawyer talking,
The height issue poses a major,
Yes.
especially in the building that was on the road, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's a major issue for us, and it's, it kind of, I think David's comment before, or maybe it was David's comment was, it changes the, characteristic of the town as you enter town. It changes your whole vision of what town you're coming into, if that's
Especially it's
the
a
first thing
gateway,
you
it's a
see
gateway, yeah.
as in our, and that's our main, that's the main road
Yeah.
into town is that road.
Sure.
So, if he says, I would say to, the discussion we had as a board last time, if the answer to the height issue is a solid no, then we can just pack all this stuff up and,
Tell them to go take the other
tell them
route.
to go the other route and,
We'll take our chances.
take our chances with, all the people who've told us for the last 4 or 5 years, we get 10%, we get 10%. Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but
And, by the way, before we do anything else, we would then move to declare ourselves safe harbor.
yeah,
By
well, that's
that
the
point,
first
We'd
step.
certainly
You
pull
can't
out
do that
that.
until
we would-
someone
We would
files.
pull out the fact that we have the documentation to support the fact we're safe harbored. So if you want to go the 40B route, we are not going to hesitate to tell you that we are safe harbored.
And Lou's aware of that, because he's
Yeah, I know he
commented on
is.
it to me. So he's aware that the town's position is that it has met its safe harbor based upon land area. He knows that.
However,
Well,
DHC has not agreed with that yet.
Well, however, he knows the efforts that have been made by many a community to claim that they're compliant. I'm not saying you're not, I'm not saying you are, but he knows that, far more times than not, the HCD has said, nice try. So he's apparently willing to roll the die. Then again, we've been getting that threat for many months now, over a year now, longer than that. And he's not made an application to Mass Housing or MHP for a straight out 40B. Will they? I don't know. But you're right. We'd have to wait until the appropriate time. That would be once the application's submitted. The Zoning Board of Appeals then can pull out that card and they have an opportunity to challenge it, and that process plays out.
So they don't find that, but to David's point, he was saying that we do that ahead of time. We don't do that ahead of time,
no.
I
correct?
can remind him. I can remind him
Well,
again.
yeah.
that
He already
continues to
knows.
be our position.
No, so I think what David's saying, they know that we feel as though we've met
Yes.
the requirement.
Right, okay.
We have previously forwarded the letter to the state, and they haven't responded because there's no project.
Right.
We'll have
Okay,
to
so you-
resubmit the letter once we have a project, and then they respond to it. And but, you
Well,
know,
and can I also clarify, Mr. Chairman, that there was also a possibility that that particular report would not be sufficient, that a further, more extensive report.
It said it was a $30,000.
30, at the time, it was estimated to be about $30,000, and that does not also include legal fees if it's taken to court. So that's my job is to remind you.
Yeah.
If it, that's money well spent, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's fine.
So,
If we win.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Well,
But
it's always-
I agree. I mean, you know, I know there's been those that have suggested that you never win that battle, but we might have to take the shot at it, because if he's not gonna bend, it's worth a shot.
I think it would mean a lot, well, it would mean a lot to me if he would at least come back with something. That he would come back and show something workable. It may not be 35 feet, but maybe it's something of a height or something, so,
Well, Lou,
just to show.
Lou would be a poor negotiator, and Lou is not a poor negotiator, if he simply said, oh, you want 35 feet and a reduction in units? We'll have that for you tomorrow. It's not gonna happen. We're gonna get a response and say, well, is that an end-all, be-all? Is that a, best and final offer? And I'm gonna say, well, I don't believe so, but, you come back and you reduce the overall height by 3 feet, you're wasting our time, so don't waste our time. If you've got a proposal, make the proposal, but don't waste our time.
Yeah.
See what we get.
What was it? What
You
was
know-
the setback? The setback was less than 25 feet.
No, well, yeah,
The road.
but the setback was only 23. I mean, it was only 2 feet difference.
Yeah, but,
That's not really
no, it's
yeah,
it's a number.
it is.
all right, so we all agree that Adam picks up the phone.
No, I agree. I think that makes sense for us, because, we could be here for hours and hours every other week going through this, and if he's not gonna come towards us, and some of these issues that, we don't wanna yield on, or, at least wanna start a serious negotiation about, then we would be wasting his time and our time, and your time. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Justine, do you agree?
Yes.
The best, and I've been saying this since the outset, the best case scenario for them is to present a different project with a lower height that does not cross town lines, that only involves Maynard, bring it to us, and we'll talk with you. That's sort of my,
Initially, he said no, but
I don't know, I don't know if he's gonna.
That's
come
my
back- I don't know
own-
if he's gonna come back with something that doesn't straddle the town lines, but, I mean, if he comes with, if he addresses the others, I think unless,
by necessity, it shrinks the,
the town line piece doesn't excite me as much as the height in the other. I'm not it's not as excitable of an issue to me as the other two.
Well, I'm using it as leverage, because
Yeah.
what it does is it, by necessity, they have to change the project, and by necessity, it then shrinks the project, because the density is really the issue.
Okay. You leaving?
It's too much fun.
She's like, that's it, I'm done.
Oh, I thought you were leaving. I thought you were leaving. Oh, there he's leaving. Thank you.
Leaving everything.
Thanks, babe.
have a good night.
Did you get everything? You got everything.
That's all my stuff.
All right, I think that's our best avenue at this point.
So, can I just be clear?
Yes.
You want Attorney Costa
Yes.
to contact the attorney for the other party and see what he can work out in regards to this particular height issue, as well as see if a new design can be presented to the board at some date,
Yeah.
not necessarily the
Not
February
necessarily
19th
the 19th,
meeting,
right.
or, okay, so would you like Joel Kahn and Attorney Levine to come on the 19th?
There's no reason for
If
that,
unless
they come
they
back with the
come
design.
back to Adam and say, oh yeah, we'll be
Yeah,
there with
exactly.
a new design and new things, and
Okay.
I
So come back when the design, if they are prepared to provide that
I
design,
would think that would be our best path.
okay? And Attorney Costa's not available on the 19th anyways?
Yeah.
So if you'd like him there.
Well, that makes that
Which
easy.
we knew. Okay.
Okay, very well.
Sorry to drag you out here, but I think it was productive in
I think it was
No,
productive.
we-
We needed
we-
some direction, and we've got it.
Yeah, we've got a direction. We've got a direction.
We don't know what we're gonna get, we got a direction.
Get direction. I don't know else feels it's a good one, but we got one. All right,
Thank you.
thank you. So I see that we have a budget discussion, but there's no document.
No change.
Is that why it's blank?
That's why it's blank. No, thank you.
We have not won the lottery yet.
No, we have not.
Darn it.
And as the discussion was already alluding to earlier, there's no change from the state that I know of, but I will provide you when I have that in hand, if that is the case. But we're preparing for Saturday's joint public hearing.
Will we get that before Saturday?
I'm trying to get it to you as quickly as possible. I'm a little.
Now,
I
really,
understand it's your first one, so I'm not, gonna beat you up about it, but I was just hoping,
All right. I didn't.
Do you plan,
appreciate that.
do you plan on?
There will be no surprises.
Well-
It's the same budget numbers. It's the same because it's my town administrator's budget based on the January 21st comprehensive budget submission.
And you plan on sharing that with the school committee too, so that they
They have it all as well.
Okay.
I mean, actually, it's been public for weeks.
Yeah, but
Oh,
your presentation.
oh, that's true. School committee,
Justin?
Don Capel, well, right, but Don is representing the school committee on her, and she and I made sure that she has the true numbers as she's been preparing her budget presentation, that it matches our numbers, and it has, it's been the same.
And that's where the problem was.
Right.
Last year particularly, where the numbers that were presented on Saturday were completely different than the numbers that had been presented to
Yeah,
them.
no, I haven't touched,
Yeah.
you would have seen it as well. No, I haven't, no change in numbers.
so we're still we're
Still that budget
Well, with the,
shortfall of
agenda
172,000.
created by Ken and Becky?
That agenda is still the same, so I have it here, Mr. Chairman, if you would like to go over it one more time.
No,
But
no,
there
no,
was-
we'll go over it later in the week, but it was just.
Actually, so they were asking, it would need to be posted by tomorrow. So, but it's the same, it hasn't.
Okay, yeah.
I can go over it quick if you would like for the.
Yeah, for everyone, yeah.
So,
Just so, I don't know if everybody knows it, but at some point, a few weeks back, Ken Estabrook approached Greg and I about the FinCom's involvement in the meeting, and, it's supposed to be partly their meeting, and he has some discussion topics that he wants to touch on at the meeting, so it's gonna be a little different than in the past, but, it's just, you can just read them the agenda, I guess.
9 a.m. at the library, Chairman De Silva and Chairman of the Finance Committee, Ken Estabrook, gives opening remarks. It goes into the FY20 budget presentation by myself. That includes operating budget, capital improvement plan, and then important points or trends, because again, as the Chairman was alluding to, it's meant to be a discussion per the charter's intentions. Followed by a quick break, and then goes into Don Capel, Vice Chairman of the School Committee, to give the school committee's budget presentation. And then it would go into a Finance Committee overview by Chairman Estabrook, and then questions and answers amongst the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee.
I think that's pretty consistent with what we've done in the past. The only difference is the meeting did not include a comment part period at the outset from the Finance Committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Otherwise, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, it is, except that he has there's a lot of quotations in the letter he wrote us about what the charter says about it, and
Right.
charter says a lot of different things about it that, Ken interprets his way, and I'm not gonna argue with it. It's one day of the year.
So I had discussed it with the Finance Committee, and I think I said this last Selectmen's meeting. I just wanted to get their intentions of it, and it seems to be, mine will be less detail oriented according to like the minutia of the budget. It would be more supposed to be provoking. It's supposed to be to allow for it to facilitate discussion amongst the two bodies. I'm trying. We'll see how the presentation.
Well,
So are you gonna facilitate the whole meeting, or
No, it's not. It's
is everybody, you are?
He's trying to throw it at me.
I am. It's not my meeting. I mean, I will give when I'm asked, but it's not.
I was gonna go to look at an art exhibit Saturday morning.
You still can, I guess, if you want.
I'm so cultured now, it's crazy.
Donna's still got a project.
I saw her projects in Florida.
Yeah, he was talking about your
I
projects
went to
last
Florida.
meeting.
I went to Florida, and I was like, I'm going out there to visit. And the girl said, they're not here. They're not at the museum. We got caught up in the middle of a third grade field trip. I don't think my
Chris fit
wife's,
right in.
I don't think my wife's ears have recovered yet, all that noise, but it was fun.
So 9 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock?
So, actually, the question I have about the
Verify
the
that.
agenda, if I can just
I got
Yes.
jump in.
for 8 o'clock.
So last year, when I was trying to attend the meeting, I couldn't find it online or anything. I couldn't find it listed anywhere.
Couldn't find, it will be posted.
So it should be posted online. It wasn't on
Becky
it
will
wasn't
send it to
online
you.
last year.
Oh, okay. No, Becky's kind of
so-
chomping on the bit to have it posted
get it
like
going. Okay.
today, so it'll be posted like every other meeting.
So it'll be on the website like
Yes.
everything else.
So speaking about Becky, she's initially sent us 8 o'clock, just so you know.
Well,
Is it
they
8
do
o'clock
have-
or 9 o'clock? My calendar said 8 o'clock.
No, wait, hold on. This says 9 o'clock and she gave this to me.
It might, the doors might open up and then they
you say
they
8
have,
So maybe that,
My understanding was 8.
they have,
Wait, wait, what?
Whatever he says, he's the boss.
but the official agenda says 9, so it's
9
9.
AM,
Okay.
9, 8
And they
o'clock.
have,
Do you wanna-
and
do you wanna
and they
clarify
have,
with Becky
they
now
have
before?
breakfast, you know,
Well,
little snacks.
Maybe that's what that was.
so it's
Yeah.
get there at 8 and then be ready to talk at 9.
I don't want to be there at 8. I think 9 AM on a Saturday,
Okay.
If it says 9 on the agenda,
Kidding me?
yeah.
Okay, moment of hardship, make him wake up early.
You can get around to
Maybe that's
golfing
what-
first.
breakfast,
He can run a golfing up here.
Maybe that's what she meant, Mike's right.
you can have an
Breakfast 8 to 9.
orange juice 8 to 9.
Yeah. What a muffin.
What happened was that we got there at 8, but we really didn't start till 9.
Correct.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So that's probably what.
All right.
that's probably what it is.
So I don't see much in the town administrator's report.
That's because
Uh,
Stephanie
last
must have
week.
been away.
No, it's only a week.
just had- we
It's
just
only
had,
a week from
Only been a
last
week.
week.
We just had one,
That's
but,
why.
This is
It's only
always
a
done in a
week.
week.
I've only got.
Yeah, Vic kept saying a couple of weeks ago, a couple of weeks
Appreciate-
ago.
Yeah, it's,
So-
but no, I mean, work is continuing around town, but
Yeah.
the department heads didn't have anything significant to submit, so,
Yeah.
so I wrote in sort of it looks like my itinerary for last week, but,
Okay,
no, we're moving a lot along.
okay.
I know you've been busy, that's for sure.
Just, so, I know, David, that you wanted to attend and you couldn't. Last Thursday, we did the hero
Yeah.
banners thing. So, we met, the three of us, and it was Kate, Karen, there were several people, there was 10 people in the room. But anyways, they're gonna send out the next set of meetings shortly. But just for the record, it's a program that's in several towns around us, and it's banners that hang off of telephone poles or light poles that would honor our veterans in photographs with dates and names and everything. So we're moving forward, and we're gonna try and hook it up with the Sesquicentennial group, because the two towns that have done it around us both said it takes about a year and a half to get off the ground, and so if that's the time frame,
Good timing.
it will fall right in time with the Sesquicentennial. So we thought that that would be good. And then I talked to Greg for a couple minutes after the last meeting. He said David wanted to be a part of this group as well, but there would be three of us, and
Oh, I can
we
walk.
wouldn't
I
have
can
to,
see.
we wouldn't have to post it because it's just informational. So we could all go, in Greg's opinion. And the other thing, the last thing is, we talked about it tonight with the schools and the issues at the school, and I had sent, just because it was blowing up over the weekend, so Sunday morning, I sent an email out to Dawn and Justin saying, look, I see you guys are getting, beat up pretty good in the social media realm and all of that. I said, if there's anything that the board can do, come and let us know, or anything else. And so up to date to today, they haven't really reached out for anything for us, and that's why, I didn't want to, bash them, and I'm not bashing them now, but they really have not asked for our help. And so, if we jump in and try and do something other than provide Aaron's services, Greg's help, and the help of Tim?
Tim Goulding, yeah.
Yeah, Tim Goulding, and that's as much as we can do until they ask, so. I guess
Yeah, I
unless
think
anyone
that
else has had
gentleman's,
more, that's where we're at
that
with
gentleman's
it.
concern was more or less his own personal citizen's concern.
Yeah, and that's.
That didn't
and
come
I-
from the school committee.
Yeah, and I understand that, and that's perfect, but I just want to let you guys know, I had reached out to them, and said if there's anything we can do, bring it up Tuesday night when you come to talk to us about the other stuff, and we'll certainly be able to consider any suggestions you have that we might be able to participate in the issue. And there was no, as you saw, there's no desire to have us get involved from their part, so.
Yeah.
We still are here to offer it, we have not been asked, so that's all I'm saying, but.
And then what happened to that, the investigator reporter that died down?
The news reporter?
Yeah.
I think Dr. Girardi, school
Answered
superintendent, had.
that person?
What's that?
He answered, Girardi
Right,
answered the
but,
person?
you know, like working through with our PR firm.
I got you.
But I don't recall who specifically spoke to the
Okay.
reporter.
The only comment I want to make about that whole situation is, and I contacted Justin on this topic. You know, I don't look most of the time at the social media stuff, but it was brought to my attention that, you know, this was blowing up, so I did look at it. And what bothers me is and it's a relatively few number of people that are really going overboard, I think, but is the assertion or the insinuation that our school committee and the superintendent of schools don't have a care for our students and the kids of Maynard. And, you know, I've been doing this for close to 12 years, and although I've disagreed with many members of the school committee along the way, and superintendents, and on issues, and on different topics along the way, I've liked them all, and what I have also known about all of them is that they care about our kids in this town more than one can imagine. And they advocate for them consistently. And to see people say that, you know, it's like they're looking to save money on the backs of our children and those types of things is just so out of line for what they are as individuals and they are as public officials. And, you know, Maynard is better than that. And, you know, the conversation has to be better than that. And we will get through this, and it's not what led to the whole thing, as I said to Justin last night, was their intention to move quickly to get things underway rather than, because it wasn't an emergency per se based on what we're seeing. It was something that we took as a town, or the school committee, my perspective, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they took proactive measures to move quickly rather than having the impression that they waited until the summertime when the kids were out of the school to clear up this problem. They could have waited. It would not have been, from what I understand, it would not have been a health issue or a safety issue. They took proactive measures by calling the insurance company to say, can we do this? The insurance company, somewhat surprising to me, said yes. So they jumped on it and did it immediately, and it become as if they are not looking out for the best interests of the students, and in reality, it's quite the opposite. And so it's somewhat unfair, if not more than somewhat, as to how it's been perceived. And so those are my comments. And, you know, I know people are concerned. I would be concerned about my child if they were in the school thinking that, oh, there's asbestos out there, but that's not, apparently, I'm not a scientist, but that's not what it appears to be. It's just that there are asbestos items that need to be removed, and it's not spreading the asbestos through the
Airborne.
the air. Yeah, it's not. That's my understanding. So
And I think that was his.
if that's an accurate reflection of the hazardous issues, I think that is, based on what I know.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Out of the abundance of caution.
Exactly.
That's always been their approach. And I did attend the meeting on Monday morning.
Yesterday.
Was it yesterday? I did attend the meeting and with the school superintendent, plus school staff, teachers union, and the paraprofessionals union. And they are developing a plan, but it does take time and it does take patience. And it's difficult to convey a plan that is not yet formulated or finalized because you don't want to mislead people. And
I also appreciate the parents who are concerned about the fact that some of this stuff is coming. You know, Sunday evening, they learn that certain kids can't go to school. I get that. That's a different issue, though, from the issue of what they're doing inside the school and what's going on inside the school. That's a procedural, administrative communication, that could be worked on.
Yeah, but it's also, to your point, it's happening. Like, it's happening
It's
now.
fluid.
You know,
It
it's
has
happening
to,
now. You're
right.
finding out,
Right.
you know, they're making decisions, you know, during a football game, you know, in conference call. Here, this is what we're doing. We're gonna do this. Send an email out now through whatever systems we use to get in touch with parents.
That's right.
Because I asked Dawn those questions yesterday when I talked to her, and I didn't, to David's point exactly, I didn't know anything about this. I started hearing about it because someone from another town called me and said, "What's going on in your town? What are you doing to the kids now?" I'm like, "What? What are we doing?" And the comment was that, "All right, well, how can you possibly be putting kids at risk?" And I'm like, no one would put these kids at risk. So to David's point, that's the way I saw it, was you're going out of your way to take kids out of harm's way.
Right.
And the reaction is worse than if you left them there. But
Well, you know, I hope you're wrong, Mr. Chairman. I would that the reaction is worse. I mean, I suspect that as Selectman Gavin was saying, that like they did this because they felt it was the better approach than doing nothing.
that's what I'm
or being
saying.
perceived to do nothing.
They did this because they thought it was the best approach to get every kid in a safe place
Right.
for that Monday morning.
Right.
Yet people are still suggesting that, you know, they don't have the children's best interest at heart.
Right.
I mean, listen, I'd like to sit around tomorrow morning and watch cartoons. You know, maybe a kindergartner doesn't, but would you rather be sitting in a room watching a movie or a cartoon or something than sit in a room that potentially could make you sick?
Right.
I mean, there's a balance here, but I think people are suggesting that, you know, the school committee and the superintendent and the administration don't have these children's best interests at heart. And to David's point, nothing could be further than the truth in my dealings with them.
That's my understanding as well.
I think that it kind of one thing that Lindy said earlier during her presentation, it kind of resonated with this issue, which was that they're going back with the meetings, with the public meetings, but they want to go back a little bit at a time, and they want to give the people time to process it because it's a big change.
Okay.
So if you give it a little bit at a time and you give
Bite-size.
them bite size, if you give them the information that they need in order to show why they've
Right.
made these decisions.
Right.
And I think that that's what people right now are kind of craving, and they'll get it, but unfortunately, they don't have, the school committee and the administration are still working on that solid plan. They don't want to do something on Monday
Right.
that they have to change on Tuesday,
That's
that they then
absolutely
have
correct.
to change on Thursday, that they don't.
Nope.
So, and I will say, the other part of it is, at the end of the day, the school committee members and the administration all have kids.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do this to their own kids. And they are trying to do what's best in this bad situation. So that's my.
And I think from our standpoint on Thursday, we'll show support by being there, because I think that's going to be an important meeting, so.
And I don't discount the concern that parents are
course not.
expressing and
Absolutely.
what have you. What I have frustration over is the
Presumption.
the comments that are being made that are just hurtful and indicative of the fact, alleging that people have motives that are just not accurate as far as what they are as people.
It's careless. Careless. So, do you have anything else,
I
Christine?
don't, thank you though.
David?
No.
Armin?
I'll save it for another time.
Okay.
It's getting late. It's getting
We'll be
late.
back in 2 weeks.
It's getting late, yeah.
All right, well, I make a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? And our next meeting is the 19th. and-
Do we want to look at that? We adjourned? We adjourned